Welcome, everybody. Thank you for your patience. I'm not going to have a clicker, so we're going to do a manual move between the slides here. Can we back to the first one? Just want to note that this is the Hastings trustee presentation on the bond for June 9th, 2025. And next page, please. So whenever I prepare stuff like this, I always like to do some research, and I often end up on like the Hastings Historical Society site and spend an hour looking through stuff inadvertently. This photo caught my eye. It's from 1927, and it shows a group of kids swimming. This was well before Hillside Pool, swimming in the Selma River. And this stuck with me partly because I love the look of it, the feel of it. It's almost like a Thomas Eakins painting or something. But what it really struck me about was how much Hastings is a place that has a sense of place. It's not, a term I learned when my son went to college was census designated place. This place really has a DNA that goes back to this time. And through all this whole process, when people get upset, or they want things a certain way, or they're worried about this certain aspect, it really resonates honestly with me because it's very hard to move someplace forward and still hang on to what you have. And I feel all the people in Hastings that some aspect of this comes through this village still. And that's something that we're trying to preserve. It also resonates with me because my father was born in this year, and if anybody knows history, obviously this is sort of the years before the deluge, so to speak, in this country, worldwide, and everything to come ahead. And for me, that dovetails with one of the themes that Dr. McCursey has spoken about a lot, which is that we want this school to be an oasis for the children of Hastings. And a lot of what's in this bond tonight reflects that. Next slide. The other photos I kind of stuck on had to do with three sort of seminal events in the history of Hastings. It's a phrase that there are decades when nothing happens, and there's weeks where decades happen, and it's not really weeks, but this 4-year period from 63 to 67 fundamentally changed the school and the town. Hillside Elementary was built, authorized in 63, built in 64. I think that's one of the first classes in 65. Hillside Pool with barbed wire was built in 65, and then the Burke Estate was purchased in 67, and that's the old Berkeley Crest House, actually. And I think back to decisions that the villagers made at this time. These moves were a massive expense.
Can I make a cut it for 1 second?
I'm sorry, sure. The clicker will work?
Yep.
Oh, right on. Joe, thank you very much. So it'll work? Let me see. There we go. Okay, thank you so much. So, as I was saying, this was a massive expense at the time for these villagers. In fact, when they bought the Burke Estate, they were looking forward that they might need it a couple years forward. It was something that they were thinking ahead. And this process tonight that we're a part of is a part of all that, where this village started, which goes well back beyond that, and the same sort of decision making where we are making some very fundamental decisions about the future of this village. So tonight we're looking at bond. Obviously the vote is on June 17th. We're going to look at what is in the bond, why it's there, and why now. Just to get on the same page, most of the bond touches all three schools, but most of it has to do with the Farragut complex. It is 5 buildings. They were built at 4 separate times, 1902, 1911, 1925, 1931. It is the entirety of the middle school and high school classroom space. That's what we're talking about. I'm going to try the laser pointer here. The only part that is newer is the Cochran Gym from the early 70s there. But all of this, the middle school is this part, and the high school is this part. What's in the bond? Prop 1, I think everyone knows it quite well, so I'm going to skip over the fine details here, but it is about the mechanicals, electrical, the plumbing, the masonry work. It's about $11.2 million, represents about 30%, 29% of the bond. Just some visuals of what we're talking about. Building envelope stuff where there's masonry, the indication of leaks, open mortar joints, things like that. Mechanicals, we have some critically obsolete HVAC units. There's a lot of stuff that's not up to code. It's been grandfathered in. A lot of stuff that needs to be replaced. It's at the end of its life. Oh, see, this always happens. Thank you. No, where did it go? Oh, weird. It's skipping one slide, right? No, that's fine. Somehow it's, maybe I deleted it by accident. Yeah. No, that's okay. There was a slide showing some of the photos of the interior of the school and how old the school is on the inside. Puckered floors, ceilings with pieces missing, just a general look of wear and tear. There was a shot of the Farragut gym and the sort of the wear and tear on that space. And that stuff's not covered by the bond, but with buildings that average 108 years old, you know, if you go in there, everything is sort of worn and needs care or attention. And one of the things that happened this year was a library ceiling collapse that we had in March. This is unrelated to the December flood. We had an additional collapse of a ceiling that happened in 2 classrooms over the summer. These events are expensive, and they come out of our operating budget. This one alone, this was one weekend where it cost $100,000 to repair it. And this year alone, we spent $500,000 in unscheduled repairs, unrelated to the flood. The big event was the flood. This is when, on Christmas Eve, when a pipe burst in the roof of the Farragut wing and rained down for 24 hours, and it resulted, this is the 1902 building, this resulted in a complete destruction of the building. This is actually, the subflooring has been replaced in this photo, I believe, right? It was just complete clear out. This is covered by insurance, luckily, but it was $10 million of damage that happened, and it was a pipe from a fire suppression system that was installed, as I said last time, in the Eisenhower administration, 80 years old, and it failed, and that was the result. These are very old buildings, and, oh, here's the photo. Yeah, so you can see some of it. With such an old set of buildings, you know, there's a question that sort of arises that haven't we bonded a lot to take care of this infrastructure? And the answer is that no, Hastings-on-Hudson has not bonded a lot. This village has underinvested in capital expenditures that go into the schools. I'll read it here. In the past 30 years, neighboring districts like Dobbs Ferry, Ardsley, and Irvington have bonded $35 to $60 million more into their school systems than Hastings. This chart here is from when we were trying to pass the 2018 bond. You can see at the bottom, this is the annual debt service per student. The bottom, post-bond, so we didn't know if the 2018 bond was going to pass. It did. We're standing in the result. Even with that debt at 1266, we were obviously well beneath Dobbs Ferry, 80% beneath Ardsley, and more than 100% beneath Irvington. Since that chart, okay, we have not passed any additional bonds. In that time, Dobbs Ferry has passed $20 million, Ardsley 50, Irvington 19, Edgemont 62, Tarrytown 92. And where this lack of investment, I'm sorry, let me back up. So going back to this, so this lack of bonding, it's even the bonds that we have passed in the last 30 years, the classroom space has been virtually untouched, despite all of this educational spaces dating from at least 1931. Apart from a high school science lab update in the 2000 bond, there's no money from any of the other bonds, not from 2014, not from 2018, that has touched any of the classroom spaces. As I explained earlier, we're not trying to catch up on dollars. The trustees did not say, well, wow, we're really falling behind on money, we've got to catch up. But we see the results, and the lack of investment is catching up with us. The most marked place where this happens, or where it shows up, is in the space differential between the middle school and the high school. And as I mentioned, the bond touches all 3 buildings, but this is really kind of the heart of the project. The high school is 66,000 square feet. The middle school is 38,000 and change. That's a difference of 40%, even though they serve the same number of students. You can see at the bottom there, a high school student has about 127 square foot per capita. For middle school, it's 74. Just to reference, this renovated space, it's about 118 per student. Those numbers do not include the shared spaces, so they would both pop up a little bit, but obviously the differential is the same. It's 42% less space. There's a lot of talk about what we've included here or what's not. But this is the experience these children have of their schools, the 42% less space. And there's lots of numbers. This is also correct. This is a comparison between the learning spaces between the two schools. The learning spaces in the middle school, 30,000 square feet. The learning spaces in the high school, 57, right? It's almost double, actually. But tonight, we're not really looking at sort of the numbers or the way we can include things or drop them out to make the numbers look different. The reality of these schools is summarized by a letter that we sent to the paper a couple weeks ago. I'll read it. Though the upcoming bond touches on each of our 3 schools, Prop 2 at its heart is an attempt to redress the state of the middle school, which is 40% smaller than the high school, even though it serves the same number of students. This lack of space happened not by design, it happened by downsizing, and flowed from decisions begun in the late 80s and early 90s when the school district fell to under 1,000 students, 40% smaller than it is today. During this time, approximately 10,000 square feet, I'm sorry, Marina, would you just clear that for me? During this time, approximately 10,000 square feet and many classrooms that were in the Farragut complex were turned into offices and a cafeteria. This space never returned to the middle school. As the district population has rebounded, it's currently 1630, along with New York State curriculum mandates, which we'll look at, and changes to special education, which affect the middle school, which we'll look at. The community has made it known to our board that our middle school has become hard to learn in, hard to teach in, and hard to lead. Both data and observation bear this out. Much of the work contained within Prop 2 seeks therefore to redress something fundamental. It is about ingredients which our community may consider central and deserved for every child's opportunity in school: space, light, quiet, and organization. What we know as trustees is that families are more apt to describe their experience of the middle school in these critical formative years in opposite terms, as tight, uncomfortable, loud, and chaotic, and that our most vulnerable students are impacted most. So aside from all the numbers, one of the most important ones is 10,000 square feet of space disappeared from this middle school, and it has never returned. Farragut Middle School has a space problem. This is a photograph just taken on a normal changeover between classes. The experience, again, of the middle school is cramped, it is noisy, it is disorganized. That extends to the classrooms, which we'll look at, to the hallways, and in the lunchroom. I would additionally point out, it's not just the number of students, it's also the way that we use the rooms. You see it on here, classrooms are used by different teachers at different times of the day, even for different subjects, while staff have no offices and no prep space. Space problem. So how do we know, besides with the common sense of things that we just described? This is a classroom space comparison by subject between the middle school and the high school. And there's no guideline. I think it was probably common sense that a high school generally is larger than a middle school. But these numbers are, larger than common sense would allow, let's say. The math department in the middle school is 40% larger than, the high school math department is 40% larger than middle school math. Special education in high school is 75% larger than the middle school. In science, high school science is 220% larger than middle school science. And art is unbelievably 430% larger than at the high school than middle school. Some of the repercussions from this: we have a New York State curricular mandate for 5th graders in science where they have to have a lab component. We don't have labs for them, so they have lab on a cart. The materials are wheeled into the room. In the art room, the 5th graders have art on a cart because we don't have space to fit them. So you have children who come from this building for 5 years when they have an art room, and they have, for their 5th grade, And by the way, the busiest classrooms, they have art on a cart and a lab on a cart. Space problem. Again, how do we know? We know that 19 of the 24 classrooms in the middle school are below state standards, well below. New York State standards for if you want to build a new classroom is 770 square feet. I think we average in the 680s, and we have some that drop down even smaller than that. This includes all the math classrooms are under state minimums. All the language classrooms are under state minimums. Every science classroom below the National Science Teaching Association standards. So that's not New York State standards, but the NSTA has a larger square foot requirement for what they call safe learning in a science environment. Every science room is below that standard in the entire building. We also know the effects that we see as trustees. It's not, correlation is not causation, but as trustees, we've often puzzled when we look at data that we collect on the children. We have a Panorama SEL survey that's administered 3 times a year. Is that right? Right? That it sort of assesses a student's attachment to the school, their comfort in the environment, their ability to learn. And that goes, is it K-8? We stop? We don't do the high schoolers, do we?
For the Panorama, no. The high school is just not.
Oh, so Panorama is K-12. Right.
Not as young in the hillside.
Okay. We also have state testing data. We have internal version of that called a STAR assessment. This paints a data picture that when we look at it as trustees, we see kids thriving in this building. We see high schoolers sort of thriving, but there's this sag, this dip that happens in the middle school. And again, it might be the age, it might be lots of things, but at some point it starts to occur to us that perhaps the state of the buildings and the experience of this middle school is part of the issue. We also learned this from principal and teacher feedback. The principals are extremely conscientious, and granular. When they're designing the ICT classrooms, they might say, you know what, last year we had this many kids in there and the kids didn't learn. We need to make it a little smaller. We need to shift people around. They have extremely boots on the ground feedback about how that building works and how it affects the children there. Same thing for teacher feedback, which you'll see part of. We have parental feedback and experience. We also have the very clear issue where ICT classes, which I'll get into, do not have the space to be effective. What is an ICT class? An ICT class is an integrated co-teaching class. So it is a more modern special education model where there are 2 teachers in a classroom. Oh, I'm sorry. There are 2 teachers in a classroom. One is a general education teacher and the other is a special education teacher. And there will be a mixed cohort of general education students and a smaller cohort of special education students. And the way that classroom works is the special education teacher will engage with the special education students, but also any of the gen ed students that are struggling. And these classes they have 2 teachers. There can be 1 aide, 2 aides, 3 aides, things like that. So it becomes a very busy classroom. This is a model prepared by PMDW of how spaces work optimally. You can see in the middle what they listed as sort of our current standard usage, where we have 680 square foot rooms with 24 students. It's not ideal, but it functions. On the left, in red, is what happens when you have 30 students. We have lots of classes with our ICT that are 30 people, 30 students. There could be 31 individuals in there, 32, 33, 34. And the way you teach in an ICT class is it's not direct instruction. You split people off. You do small group instruction during the class. You do check-ins. And the ICT model, it needs space to function. It does not work in that model at the left, which is what so many of our classes resemble. And this is a new thing. So when people say, well, it worked in the past, I don't see the issue. ICT classes make up 30% of the middle school schedule. That's double what it was only 10 years ago. Going back to ICT, the HOH classification rate, so the number of children who are qualifying for services, is up 80 to 100% in the past 10 to 15 years. It's about 18% currently. And it has to be said that one of the reasons it's gone up is because of how Hastings-on-Hudson used to run in special education. What I'm noting here is that in 2016, Hastings-on-Hudson settled a federal lawsuit. I'll read it. The Hastings-on-Hudson School District in New York recently settled a federal lawsuit brought against it in June 2014 by a group of parents of special needs students. According to the Rivertowns Enterprise, the school board approved the settlement in its June 21st meeting. In the lawsuit, parents had complained that there was a pattern in the district of inaccurate classifications that were based solely on a desire to save the district money. That, if anyone knows the details of that, that goes back to 2007. And that was settled with the federal government, I'm sorry. And we had a process by which we rebuilt the special education department, and it functions much better. The classification process has improved immensely. But the middle school spaces required to support that, the ICT classrooms I'm talking about, the testing, those do not exist or do not exist sufficiently. We don't have any testing accommodation, any space. Children take tests in hallways. Middle school needs more classroom space. And I want to make it very clear, because to be very honest, I've heard many times people tell me that, you know, we don't want to be too accommodating because we're going to become a magnet for special education students. I've heard it any number of times. The reality is, even as our classification rate has doubled, 18% now, the average in New York State is more like 30%, okay? And this is not something that districts do on a whim. This is an absolute legal obligation, and it should be an absolute moral and ethical obligation. Furthermore, ICT classes help all students. The model, some of our sort of North Star countries and how they teach, like Finland, the ICT model is sort of their standard way they run their classrooms. So it's really, it's for all of us, and it's for all the kids here, and to all of their benefit. How else do we know that the middle school has a space problem? If we as a board said to you, said to the community, we're going to remove 10,000 square feet from the middle school today, I mean, we can imagine what the reaction would be. And as I wrote here, what would be intolerable if it happened now has already happened. It is happening and will keep happening to successive classes of Hastings-on-Hudson students. These are quotes from staff. This is also how we know. When we brought in PPDW to do a space analysis, which I'll get into, a large part of that was interviewing staff, teachers, special ed, fully, right? And there's pages and pages of minutes. Here's some of the quotes from staff in these buildings. Classrooms are unevenly sized, not large enough for enrollment. Shared classrooms don't have adequate storage spaces, so multiple department materials are left in open classroom areas. Classroom floors are warped and uneven, tables rock. Students are up on top of each other. Fights, pushing, shoving, bullying occur. Middle school is a, quote, hot mess. This is the first time people who use spaces are consulted. Classrooms are designed for 15 students, not for 25 to 26 students. Closets are turned into offices. Middle school art room is tiny in a cave basement. Building physically stuck in the 1950s. Curriculum stuck in the 1990s. Middle school science classrooms are not capped at 24, so class sizes are 27 to 28. Unsafe. And this is just what I could fit on this slide. There's a lot more. So, middle school has a space problem. A space problem is only solved by having more space. And after over 3 years of work with multiple technical partners, the board carefully considered what minimum of space the school could effectively add, and what would be the most cost-effective way to add that space, which is what is in Proposition 2. Proposition 2 includes 6 classrooms, taking over an old cafeteria. It includes a new cafeteria and includes an entryway. The new classrooms. So this is the existing cafeteria, 6,000 square feet. It's being turned into 6 classrooms, 5 gen ed and 1 special ed at the left. It represents a 20% increase to middle school classroom space. Why convert the current cafeteria? There's a lot of reasons, which we'll go into a little bit later, but it is 50% too small by New York State standards. It requires equipment upgrades over several $100,000 that we'd have to do currently, and I guess we'd do them out of our operating budget. It also lays out perfectly as 6,000 square feet of bright, top floor classrooms because that is what it used to be before the cafeteria was put in here. And you can see it there. It's the little blue box. It is the top floor, the entire top floor. Where's my little thing? Of the Washington wing. So, could you actually point to where the cafeteria is? Yes. Sorry. So, this blue box, so the entirety of this space here is the cafeteria. The top floor of that wing that points out the back. The new cafeteria. So once an old cafeteria is repurposed, students need a new one. This is an image lots of us have seen, of course. This is a new cafeteria. It is 33% larger than the current one. It was brought up a lot. Are there concerns about overheating or the use of glass, things like that? This is a north-facing cafeteria. It obviously is absolutely modern insulation code, unlike the rest of the building. Temperature control is not an issue. I'd also like to point out, this is a concept rendering. If this passes, there will be an entire design process, which we'll talk about as well. I want to show you where it is. So it is in that courtyard. So it touches on these yellow walls. It's not as tall as this. The roof is 3.5 stories. The cafeteria will be 2.5. So it would be sort of at that level right there, like that. If you could trace a line, it would look like this. It faces absolutely north. It is bounded on all sides by taller structures. There was also a concern about the look, that it would be an eyesore or out of character. I want to point out that it is in an enclosed interior courtyard. I took this photo. I'm just standing by, not even where the gym starts, and that's what you would see. You'd see some glass. That's it. There's also some comments that the courtyard is an important green space or things like that. The courtyard is blacktop. These tables just happen to be here because it was an end-of-the-year event. Normally, it is maintained absolutely empty. Middle schoolers are not allowed. The middle school playground is down that little alleyway. They're not allowed to come here. All the doors that lead onto this space are alarmed. There's nobody here. The boiler room in this building has more occupancy than this courtyard, and truly. And I'm in these buildings, several times a week. I've never seen anybody here. And please go ask your children. Ask them if they've ever been out here or seen anybody. That courtyard, which has no use at the moment, turns into where this lives. Okay, if I go back here to the photo, I'm sort of standing. These tables are sort of where the tables would be within the new cafeteria. It turns into a cafeteria that connects, and the absolutely unused space becomes meaningful. Let me show you how it connects. That blue space there is the high school lounge. It would flow through this doorway up top and come down these stairs here. This yellow space here, that's an additional seating area that flows in. There's access to an outdoor space that doesn't exist. There's also obviously access to the middle school playground. This would become an absolutely central part of every student's day in the middle school and high school. Yes, there's only one cafeteria. Yeah, there's only one cafeteria, of course. Inside, it is designed for a faster, more organized throughput of both food and people. We'll talk about that a little bit. There are 2 entrances up here and down here. One of the issues we have in the current cafeteria, anybody who knows it, is there is a line just to get in the doorway to the cafeteria because there's kind of one entryway. There's the one at the back, but the kids use the one in the middle. There are new bathrooms right here. Our current cafeteria does not have bathrooms. There are 4 entries. There are also 2 entries out to the outdoor space. There's more seating. Again, this is 33% larger than the current one. There's also playground access. Playground access from the current cafeteria. It's on the 3rd floor. That is a set of stairs that go down and let out onto the blacktop. When there's a changeover between the different grades, It is 250 kids who have finished lunch, who are trying to get down that stairwell and go out, and it is 250 kids who have finished playing, who now want to eat, trying to get in. It takes 3 or 4 minutes to make that transition. If anybody's been there, it is like a concert getting out, or a baseball game. Truly. It's also, the question came up, well, how do you know that this is going to create quicker food service? How does it help? I mean, space helps, certainly, right? There's 2 ways, really. Number 1, that transition from kids on the playground out here to coming through doors, there's 2 of them to eat, it's much faster, it's much shorter, it's much safer. Number 2, the food line, okay? In the current cafeteria, the food lives inside a fairly small room. Kids line up. It is, let's say, this large, okay? And there's a little window. It is what I call sort of the food truck model. If you've ever been at a food truck, you line up. There's one person helping one person at a time. This is sort of more the drive-through model. It will be designed to be for faster throughput of food. So it's entirely changing the experience of eating in the room, being in the room, and getting in and out of the room. This is just a random photo of what it looks like if anybody's in this building a lot. This is a lot of what you see, stuff laying all over the place. Kids have given up on the lunchroom because of the chaos, because of the environment there, because of the time it takes. And when they do that, they give up oftentimes on going to the playground, they give up on outdoor time. They eat in the hallways, they eat in the stairwells, they eat in the locker, alcove, they eat in the library, they eat in the bathrooms. Kids don't eat. Kids also take food to class. And when we talk about the chaotic environment, this is just one sort of fundamental view into that. The board has assessed that the proposed new cafeteria location as optimal. Be very clear about this. We do not find a better place for it to go, and we looked. We do not find a better way. It creates value for the students, the school, and the community. We do not find a less expensive way that allows the addition of 6 classrooms to the middle school. But how do you know that? That's my impression, right? We had 2 technical groups, 2 architecture and engineering firms come in, PBDW. They did a Farragut Complex master plan space analysis over 10 weeks. They poured through every square foot. I misquoted it last time. It's not 200,000, it's 135,000 square feet in that building. They looked at what it's used for at every time of day, dimensional analysis. Land Group came in and did a building condition survey. This is required by New York State to assess the state of your building and see what might need attention. Oftentimes, this is just sort of bureaucratic paperwork with New York State. There are firms who, when you want to do the BCS, will send an intern or a new employee and kind of go and run around and check the list, and it's done. One of the reasons we brought Land Group in is their absolute dedication to doing this differently. They come with professionals. We had 2 engineers, and it was an architect as well? 3 engineers and 3 architects. Poured over this building, took photos of every aspect. A lot of the photos that I'm using are from them. So from that body of knowledge, gave us indications of what makes sense to build, what's doable, what's not. It's extremely complex in buildings that are averaging 108 years old, that are built at all different times, at all different levels. So right here, they know the building the way you know your house. As we brought up the quotes, they interviewed staff that spend years here, and together we ran down dozens of ideas and permutations, no matter how silly. We remember some of those conversations. What about this? What about that? We talked about building on Burke. We talked about taking over the middle school playground. But the location of the new cafeteria, for all the stuff, the reasons we indicated, made sense. It also critically allows us to get the classrooms back from existing space. And that reconversion, we have a very talented in-house staff. That reconversion of space can be done in-house. It cuts the square foot rate almost in half. So it is an extremely economical way to pursue those changes. And the plan that was prepared, and the current plan, does not block future build-out options for the school. This thing has come up, well, what if you need more classrooms and you put the cafeteria there? By code, we cannot sequester the classrooms which already exist with a classroom in front of them. It's just not doable. That space, for all those reasons, is seen as optimal by the trustees. How do you also know this is the best solution? The HTA has endorsed it. It's unusual, but the Hastings Teachers Association has endorsed the entirety of the bond. The staff, all the staff, have been part of the process, and the solutions reflect the needs and wants that they have identified. Of course, our children can spend up to 13 years in these buildings, but the staff often, it's double that. It's 30 years. They live in these buildings. They really value the chance for us to correct some of the things that they live with on a daily basis. So what comes up often is the question of, can it look different? Can it cost less? And these are, good faith questions. And one of the key things is there will be a design phase. The renderings are conceptual. A bond is about budgeting. It's not about the fine details of design. When you take a bond out, it's an authorization to spend a certain maximum amount of money. So we say, what's the sort of thing we're going to try to build? How much does it cost? And we try and borrow that amount. If we spend less, sometimes it gets repurposed, or sometimes it gets sent back to the taxpayer by never having been borrowed in the first place. But we can't spend more than that. If we need an extra dollar, we have to go back out and do an entirely new referendum. And this has happened, I think in Eastchester a couple years ago. It happens often. So a bond is about authorization to spend. If these things pass, we would begin a design phase. A design phase will have public input and process. And one of the other sort of talking points out there is that there has been no process, no chance to listen to things. We've just sort of done it ourselves, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Outside people have been involved in this process since we began talking about it 3 years ago. More to the point, the hours of public comment, we meet every 2 weeks. Conversations we have in private, Dr. McCarthy has taken a meeting with anybody who asked. The hundreds of letters that we've received, even when we read them in the dispatch. All of that stuff has changed so many aspects of this bond. We're not even in the design phase. The spend amount was changed because of that input. The format, that's why it's 3 propositions, was changed because of that input. The fact that there's no lights, that there's 2 fields, the turf type, the microplastics filter that we want to put on the drainage system, the look of the entry, the classroom count, all of these things have changed gradually over these 2 years, 3 years because of public input. If the proposition was to pass, we would have the same process, the same openness, and we would work together to design something. Oop. To me, speaking honestly, slightly less sanguine is the sentiment, go back and do it again. And I want to address this. We have a space problem, okay? Expenses really don't come from materials. You can make them come from materials, but just like when you build your house, 90% of it is going to be from Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever else. It's square footage that drives expense. We have a space problem. We need to add square footage. So the question is, well then, could you make it smaller? Make what smaller? We've taken a minimum approach. The most expensive thing, as I've explained, is to build something new. That cafeteria and the entryway. It's not even, I think it's 7,000 square feet, maybe a little bit shy of that. Hillside, the expansion of Hillside was 17,000 square feet of space. What we're talking about is 7,000 square feet of space, and the impact on that school is going to be equal to what the 17,000 square feet of space have done here. 7 classrooms we added here, 6 there, okay? So make it less expensive. The least expensive thing is to do it now. Why? New York State, we currently enjoy, Hastings-on-Hudson, a 47.5% reimbursement rate. As we've talked about for lots of reasons, we expect that to be lower. Sure. That rate locks in when the bond is completed as a legal document. That means if it passes in 2025, that's the rate we get. There is no evidence that states claw back money from a bond would end up in court and they would lose. They have an entirely other funding stream, which is where they claw back money, which is the yearly aid, the foundation aid. It doesn't touch the bond. Also, this idea, well, we'll take it down, it might be more expensive in the future, but that's just inflation. But it's not, because construction costs run well above inflation. These are construction increases over the last 5 years. It goes back pretty much the same, but this is what fit on the slide. You can see cumulatively, the construction increases over the last 5 years went up 47.5%, just happens to be the same number. During that same time, US CPI inflation went 26.3. It's an 80% difference. And you can look year by year, it's fairly close here, although that's still a decent percentage. Construction costs simply run much higher than inflation. If you try to do something down the road, even more modest, it would be perhaps the same price or perhaps likely more. Okay? So the idea that you're going to shave off somewhere 10% of space or 15, 5 years down the road, it's going to cost 20% more, but you'll get less for it. The 2018 bond, okay, this is not even going back to 2018, this is judged on when the borrowing occurred in 2019. The cost of that, adjusted for the construction, it's gone up 49.3%. That bond would be 26.8 million. I remember when that bond passed, and then we needed a supplemental. We needed to borrow a little more money, and COVID was just starting up, and the conversation was, well, don't do it now. We don't know what it's going to be like. And had we not done it, that is what we would be faced with. And we had the same problems here. We didn't have legal space for special education students. We had art on a cart. We had push-in for language for a while. The same issues existed here, but we did it then, and it would cost 49.3% more, even though it was in 2019. Most importantly, there's no plan B waiting in the wings. And I saw some comments, well, why not? This is not a negotiating position, you know? We have very hard for years. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with highly educated, trained, experienced technical partners. If the Prop 2 were to go down, it would be a signal to us that, I mean, it exists separately for a reason. It stands on its own merits. If the community says, that given all this facts, if it says, well, you know what, we see it, we hear it, but we don't think it's worth doing, there's really no there for us. We cannot, if the community turns that down, there's no going back immediately to say, well, here's this other thing we kept in our back pocket, and we can do it differently, and we can do it more cheaply. Because as I've shown you, there's no real, besides magical thinking, there's no real thing. If you want it less, you don't build it. That's the answer. And that's what the answer would be. The bond process would not be back for several years. The way bonds work, we would wait to accumulate other things that might happen or break, and then we would address those things down the road. I'm very, very serious about this point. If the field space, and we're going to get into fields in an issue in a moment, but just because it fits in here, if the Prop 3 goes down, truly, we are likely to limit community programming on those fields because to try to preserve them. Hastings is very unique in allowing that. There's lots of districts, I won't name them, but if it's only school stuff happens on fields. We have a very long history of supporting community stuff even if it's not just children of Hastings. We have a very long history of making their spaces inside and outdoor available. That's part of the sort of DNA of this community. It's also, Hastings is also unique in the way that it does not have municipal facilities. So our facilities double as municipal facilities, not just for the kids who play ASO or rec ball, but when adults go jogging on the track or on the tennis courts, that's school facilities, but we open it to the community. Moving on to the entryway. Just to note, it is, by itself, it's about a $940,000 project, and as the common thing where we say a $1.1 million valuation for houses, because that's sort of the median, we represent about $1, I'm sorry, that would be $1.50 a month, but $1 to $1.50 a month for this. The entryway is about security. It's about accessibility. These are not fancy additions to a school. These are two modern baseline requirements of any school. This is a rendering of a SHPO-approved ADA-compliant entry concept. SHPO is the State Historic Preservation Office. Given the age of our buildings, any design that we produce has to be run through SHPO for their approval. And to note, as I have before, they favor contrasting but complementary design. They, for whatever reason, do not like you trying to match the style of your building. This is sort of an up-close view. From a security perspective, you have the so-called man trap. You have one security guard that controls access to both schools. You can see Farragut Middle School is a little walkway that goes that way, and Hastings High School that goes that way. So it's absolutely about security, but at the very bottom there, it also begins to unlock the accessibility of the Farragut complex. And this question's come up a lot. Well, don't you have an ADA compliant entryway? Well, first of all, there is no ADA compliant entryway to the Hastings High School. There are two in the middle school, one which accesses just the basement floor, because that is isolated, there's no other way to access it, and the other way is here. There's a ramp with a door. When you go in that door, there's a short hallway that leads to an elevator. This door is unattended, it's not staffed. If you need to get in there, you have to arrange it, you have to call the school, security guard has to come and open it for you. It takes minutes to enter and exit the building, and the elevator that this leads to requires a key. I want to be very clear that accessibility is something that is required of modern schools. It's also, there are real people in this community whose children do not go to these schools. They live here, they do not go to these schools partly because they do not have access to the building. And that's one thing that's really critical to understand. People say, well, you have an ADA compliant entry. It makes the building code compliant. It is an entry. Someone who needs access can get in that way. But for access considerations, when a family comes to us and says, my child cannot go to school here, the district needs to pay to send them elsewhere, part of that is the access considerations. So this is a plus for code compliance, but it is a liability or a demerit for access considerations, and we're going to look at that in a second. A student sent out of district is 2 to 3 times more expensive than one that stays in the district. You do the math, we spend about $36,000 per average. It can be $70,000, it can be $100,000. That is more expensive than building the entryway on a yearly basis. And so what does access look like for real? High school accessibility, okay, it's no real access. Most of the high school classrooms are on these wings here. If you had a class on one floor and you had to go up a level, just above your head, okay, you would have to make, if you're on crutches or, poison. Point to it with my hand? Okay. Let me just get a drink. I'm very parched here. It's kombucha. Okay. So if you're a high school student and you have class here, and you're on the second floor, and your next class is upstairs, it's departmentalized, so if you have, upstairs is science. No, right? Science. This is the journey you have to make. It is 900, here's the scale. It is 900, that's 480 feet to get to the elevator. This is the only elevator, that's the entrance I showed you. You have to traverse through here, in a busy hallway, get in the elevator, go up, and then go back. There are 4 minutes between classes. That, by any estimation, and we've looked, is something like a 6 to 9 minute trip. If you're on crutches or a wheelchair or anything like that. This applies to teachers, it applies to students. Oh, the clicker. What does middle school lunch accessibility look like? Okay? Let's say you're in the middle school, here, 6th grade, and you want to get into the lunchroom. Your friends go here. They run down the hall, they certainly run. They run up here and line up, and they want to get there to eat. You go to the elevator, you take it up a floor, and then you make this journey. And you come up a steep ramp into the cafeteria. That is 15-minute or more trip to make. And there's in middle school, there's 20 minutes for lunch. That's what accessibility looks like. And imagine going back. These are the stairs. When your friends go out to the blacktop playground, these are the stairs they go down. And they're busy. It might take them a couple minutes. But if you want to get out, you go here, here, back to here, back down the elevator, out that exit, around the school, up the steep, we know this is steep, to the playground, and back. That's what middle school accessibility looks like with that ADA compliant entry. The next question we get is, well, how much of a problem does the entry solve? It's part of it. It's the start of it. It is 900 grand. It's 1,000 square feet. It's not a, it's not a miracle machine. It solves primarily, initially, an equity of access, the ability to come and go as one pleases. It provides access to that elevator, provides access to ADA bathrooms in the new cafeteria. There are currently no bathrooms except the one in the nurse's office on that floor where you enter. Obviously, it provides access to the cafeteria. It also provides access to the playgrounds and outdoors through the cafeteria. But most importantly, the entryway is the first part of mobility enhancement for these buildings. And what does that look like? This is not part of the bond, okay? But one of the things that has come up a lot whenever we do work is it's always an opportunity to say, well, how can we change the mobility and accessibility of this building? It is very hard. These are 5 different buildings at different levels, a lot of level changes. It's very difficult. But one of the things that would flow from having an entry is the next steps in that. As recommended in the PBDW master plan, we would have an egress study. We would do an accessibility study. And part of what we're looking at, so this is the existing elevator, there's the entry, right, in the middle school. Some of the ideas that have been floated are the installation of an elevator at the end of the Washington wing, because this is outdoor space. It's not that hard to install it there. Additionally, the inclusion of an elevator in the future in the cafeteria space, because again, this is new space. We can build this fairly easily. I don't know what would come of this exactly, what the layout would be, but part of what we're hoping within Entryway is to give it the impetus to say, okay, we have more access, let's keep going. Let's put in new elevators that change the entire accessibility aspect of the building. And not only is it slow, like I indicated, there are classrooms that cannot be reached in all sorts of ways. And that's something that a egress study and an accessibility study would address. So again, the entryway is the first part of mobility enhancement in that building. It has to be mentioned that Hillside is ADA compliant. This whole building, the elevator there, families move here and their child is able to go to this school for the 5 years, and then we say, well, actually, we don't have really any access or mobility, neither in the middle school or the high school. It is, the fact that a family could start here and face that stark divide is part of the reason as trustees we feel an obligation to start to address this, and that is what the entryway is starting to address. Prop 3, the Burke Athletic Fields. It's about $8 million, 21% of the bond. I'll just show you where they are. It's number 1 and number 2. Number 2 is currently our prime athletic field, Upper Burke. Number 1 is the practice field. It's not big enough for regulation play, so it's a practice field right now, but it does happen to fit a softball field. And not on this display is the softball field, which lives by itself out there at Hillside, and has issues that are well documented with drainage and how it stays wet. The idea for the first time ever would be to be able to bring this mod and JV and varsity sport back down to the complex where it belongs. And that would be on the field number 1. One of the benefits of a softball field, softball, unlike baseball, does not use a raised mound. So even though this field would be artificial turf, it's completely flat. So out of season, it would be used for all sorts of purposes, which it serves now as a practice field. The artificial turf that we've looked at and worked very hard to try and find something that is better than just what everybody else has. It is, we issue specifications for turf. We don't select products, but we're aware of products that are out there and we try and mold the specifications. We put them out, the prop passes, and then those companies can bid back on us based upon meeting all of those specifications, not the ones they choose, all of them. So what have we specified? We've specified sort of a new kind of turf, which is a no infill turf. It has no rubber infill. It doesn't require it. You can put inert infill if you want. We might use sand to weigh down the field. You don't need to. And this reduces the lack of rubber. The rubber itself is about 80% of the weight of a synthetic field. It's 80% of the synthetic polymers. It's about 250,000 pounds, 300,000 pounds. It's also, when people are worried about heat, the heat differential is very different when you don't have 250,000 pounds of black plastic sitting in the field. The field would be recyclable and are capable of being repurposed. This is not part of the field, but based on community feedback, a very real concern was the shedding of microplastics from this field. The field has a drainage system that moves into a retention system. The water there meets New York State standards, which we can go into, but additionally, we would like to install, and this is part of Prop 3, if it passes, this will happen, a microplastics filter on that drainage and retention. There would be a 12-year warranty, that's New York State law, and there would be no PFAS in the field, which is also New York State law. This is just sort of something the Student Athletics Committee put together that summarizes some of these points. Just let's see if, yeah, I mean, one of the key points is, oh, I'll move on because it's here. Just to note on the filter, down at the bottom there, this is the wording that would be, it was in Prop 3 specifications. Lastly, the stormwater management design for the project will be developed in full compliance with New York State Department of Environmental Conservation stormwater standards, which are quite strict and are monitored, by the way. It's not just you do it once and forget it. The design will incorporate a filtration system to effectively reduce total suspended solids and microplastics, thereby enhancing water quality and supporting environmental sustainability. A key thing to, the reality here is that it gets said that it's artificial turf versus real grass. It's not. It truly is a grass model that works, that can work, where 2 of the 7 grass fields that the school uses are converted to turf, versus a grass model that is not working and has not worked for many years, where obviously 0 of the 7 fields are artificial turf. In fall 2023 alone, we know that the climate is changing. We see it this year as well. It's much wetter for much longer. When these fields get wet, they stay wet. The only way to prevent them from being destroyed is to limit access to them. So it can rain one day, we're not going to play that day. It can take an additional day, 2 day, 3 day before anybody can use those fields. In fall 2023 alone, 71 home games were canceled. In spring to May 20th this year, 35 home games were canceled. These are not cherry picked, this is just what we had arranged. The data is very similar. When games get canceled, sometimes they stay canceled, but oftentimes we will turn what should be a home game into an away game. We pay for the bus to send the teams. A bus is $700 or $1,000. We might spend between $25,000 to $40,000 a year on extra busing because of that. This issue of field availability, there's nothing. It's really down to field overuse, as we put there. We looked into, are there any sort of weird reasons why these fields suffer the way they do? But it's the weather changing, and it's how much the demand that's placed upon them. 29 different field teams play on those fields. They all have games. They all have practices, daily practices for the upper levels, including Sunday. These issues are not unique to Hastings. It's regional. By the end of the summer, you'll see that Hastings-on-Hudson would be the only one in Westchester without an artificial turf. That's 48 districts in Westchester County. And again, it's because every community struggles with the same problems that we have. And let's look at that a little bit here. It's an additional wrinkle. This is a field cost comparison, which residents had asked for. This is the 20-year cost for if you put in a new grass field. I'm sorry, it's very small, but I will go through it. A new grass field, 20-year cost, versus a new AT field artificial turf, okay? So these are the totals here. This is a grass field. This is an artificial turf field. Artificial turf field is more expensive, so it's about $1.8 million, the 20-year cost for a newly installed grass field. It is about $2.7 million for a 20-year synthetic turf. Be very clear, synthetic turf does not last 20 years, which is why this includes a recarpeting charge of about $1 million, okay? Here's a critical thing, though, from the viewpoint of a school district. Besides the field use that we're trying to get, It's that the cost of a grass field, 50% of it is bondable. You install it there. But the carrying cost yearly, the work you have to do on it, has to come out of your budget. This is per field, okay? An artificial turf field is different. 98% of the cost lives bond side. Only a very small amount, $2,000 a year, is budget side. This differential is not just relieving strain on the budget, okay? It's $35,000 yearly per field. It's also that the bondable amount, we get, for our operating budget, we get state aid around 9%. As we've spoken about a lot tonight, on the bond side, we get building aid at 47.5%. So 47.5% applies to this side of the cost, whereas 8%, 9% applies to that. So we're not doing it for financial reasons, but as residents know, every year we squeeze the lemon harder and harder to try and find savings. And back of the envelope, this would be a $70,000 a year savings, which is a teacher, let's say. One of the other sort of talking points is that, well, these are sort of fancy facilities for kids who want to play high-level sports. And again, in Hastings, nothing more, could not be further from the truth. These are our participation rates for last year, because obviously when we put this together, we did not have the data for this year, but it's the same, really. In high school, 70% of kids play sports. In middle school, it's 81%. And sports, as many parents know, it is a come-as-you-are environment here. There's really not many cuts. It is a real opportunity for children to be outside. It's a chance for them to, sort of face the true feelings of winning and losing and putting in effort and camaraderie and sportsmanship. And it is a fundamental part of the education here. It is not something that is just high level. Big question, what will the bond cost? So,
There's a very important point that I want to repeat this to people, that the reason we're getting 47.5% back on the field is because it's attached to a building project.
oh, that's true.
If we did not do that this year and say in 2 years we wanted to do a field, we would not be able to get the money back. It's only repayable because it's attached to a building project.
Yeah, so sorry, I'll repeat that. So fields in and of themselves are not building aidable. It's building aid, right? So you can't just say, in New York State, we're going to put it in a new field and you receive building aid for a field. It has to be attached to some sort of building project. And so the wrinkle always is that until you have a building project, you can't really touch your fields, which is one reason these are linked together, and one reason why it would be much harder, if Prop 2 didn't pass, we couldn't say, well, we're just going to do the fields a different way. It could not happen by itself. It could, we would pay for it, but it would not be state aidable. So thank you, it's a good point. So what will it cost? First of all, most critically, the bond payments would not begin until 2029. Nothing's going to happen to your taxes this year, next year, as it has been indicated around town. As I've said many times now, we have a 47.5% reimbursement rate for the bond. So if your home assessment is about $800,000, the bond in 2029 would cost you about $540 a year, $45 a month. If your assessment is $1.1 million, $720, $60 a month. $1.35, $975 a month. These numbers would be a little lower. It's hard to calculate if you qualify for various New York State exemptions, like New York State STAR, which is income-based, Enhanced STAR, which is age-based, Veterans exemption, or local exemptions passed by our board. We do try and lower in the way that we can the taxes, but there's a senior exemption, which is income-based, and the firefighters and EMS exemption as well. Cumulatively, on that bottom line, just to put it in perspective, by 2049, if your home is worth $800,000 now, you will have spent 10 grand or 11 grand in total on this bond. And something very important to recognize is bond payments are already amortized. They're not subject to what's the word? Interest, right? It's the flat payment. If it was $1,000, if we were paying $1,000 a month, it's $1,000 all the way through to the end of the bond. So it becomes a small, every year it steps down in value. You're essentially paying for the bond in 2029 dollars, but they're constantly less year to year. It does not increase in that way. So what I would hope from a perspective of a homeowner is the belief that the work that we're doing by 2049, that we have at least preserved that value in your house of 11 grand, if not increased a lot above it. 14.4 if it's 1.1 million, 18,000 if it's 1.35. And this is not just sort of rhetoric, this is something that homeowners in New York State are concerned about, because New York State is a state with a shrinking population. If you look at school enrollment in New York State, this is the recent, only about 10% of the 706 New York State school districts grew from 2013 to 2023. The rest shrank. Of the 56 districts in Westchester and Putnam, only 11 grew. Hastings was one of those 11. We grew 2.3%. It's just true that home value stability or increase is driven by young families moving in. Schools, the quality of the schools are a main driver. Maybe the middle school is a little more, I'm sorry, Jim, you have a question?
You had a question about the numbers you had on the previous screen. When we talked the other day, and I may have misheard, but the state reimbursement of 47.5% ends after 15 years, but the bond continues for another
Yeah.
5.
So,
So is it really a straight multiplication of the 540 times 20, or is it 540 times 15, and then it goes up 47% for the last 5 years?
you might be right about that. Is that right? Okay, you are correct. So so Jim's point that he raised about state, so New York State pays you back, their amortization schedule for their own budgeting purposes is always 15 years. Again, as I mentioned before, if they owe you $1, they're going to pay you 7 cents a year for 15 years. So the 47.5%, the value of that doesn't change, but it gets paid back to us over 15 years. So what his point is, it's a 20-year bond, so the last 5 years, it would step up, the cost of the burden on the taxpayer would step up. The amounts don't change, but the burden would step up. It is also true when you look at inflation that the effect, because it's fully amortized, right? The effect, let's call it that first year when you pay $1,000, that the value of that $1,000 is actually going to exceed the value of that $1,300 that you pay 15 years in the future. Just to note, it's a little weird, but that's where we are. One of the other questions that has come up is, why are we paying, we have a field that's supposed to last 12 years, but we have a 20-year bond. 80% of this bond is going to be here, hopefully, for 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. It would not be fair, based upon the lifespan of the turf, to say, well, all of this is going to fall just on there's no 12-year bond, a 10-year bond, a 15-year bond. So that's why the bond is a 20-year term. As prices have gone up, and this is nationally, as the cost of construction has gone up, which we looked at, different states are extending the term of bonds. There are states where you can take a 30-year educational bond because of the expense is so high. So, and I think it's pretty standard now for any significant bond to be a 20-year bond.
Can you just clarify something? Despite that answer, I appreciate
Sure.
It was just parts that were a little complicated for me. When you look at that by 2049 numbers, the 10,000, the 14,000, the 18,000, do those still hold true?
Well, to Jim's point, so you would take, let's do the math very quickly. So 540 times 15 plus 540 plus 47.5%.
Say like another 8, like it'd be 300 more a year or so.
Yeah, like 300 more a year. So I'm not very good with numbers in my head, I have to tell you. But so,
$1,000
so-
more each,
right.
Okay.
So let's say 540 for 15 years and then 840 for the last 5 years. That would be cumulative. Thank you for pointing that out, both of you. Yes.
Whole point, again back on the slide, I've always been confused by the assertion in the footnote. I get a star no matter whether it's a bond or not, and it's the same amount every year. So why would anything change, whether I'm a veteran, whatever?
Meaning, so when you have exemptions, if these exemptions apply to you, it lowers your portion of the tax levy that you're responsible for. So I don't know that these numbers hold. If you have exemptions, it's being shifted. So it doesn't, you don't just pay less, the numbers go over to the other side to be paid. So my point is, if you want exact numbers, you really have to know what you qualify for in order to run these. It's all related in the same way. these numbers don't change massively just because of these changes. But for people who really want to calculate and want to know, they absolutely have to take into account the different exemptions. They're also mentioned here because lots of people don't know that they exist.
Right.
Lots of people do not know that we passed them, that there is a senior exemption. That's local. It goes through town of Greenberg. but
Even the
that's local.
veterans is a
Even the
local
veterans exemption. So
It's
I'm trying to
not
bring it up
required.
just to say, also be mindful of this.
Yes,
It's possible.
right,
I don't.
Yeah.
No, it's fair. It's a fair
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
It's certainly a fair point.
Yeah, it's right.
Lastly, sort of end where we start. I want to remind us here, people who are viewing, that you are the school. You know, when the vote comes on the 17th, Dr. McCursey doesn't have a vote, Maureen doesn't have a vote, not PBDW, not LAN. Virtually none of the people in these buildings vote. Right? These kids aren't going to vote. The kids who have been through this building, who have left, don't have a say in this. The teachers who spend 20, 30 years here don't have a say in this. The generations that are going to come into Hastings and occupy for many of our houses, they obviously don't have a say in this. So it is about the money. It is about how much you pay a month. But going back to the beginning, you are the school when you go into that. You know, you're the ones who are going to decide when we talk about 27, when we talk about 63 to 67. A few thousand people in this town are going to decide what this town feels like for generations and the effect that these schools are going to have for generations of kids. So I just hope that when we go to vote, and as we approach this last week, that there's sort of a seriousness of purpose that underlines why we're here and what we can accomplish by being part of it. So thank you all for your patience, and we're open up for questions. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry, I should put this back. Sorry.
Alex, you have said this information so many times. I don't know how you still have the patience to say it.
Are we ready for questions now?
Yes.
Okay. Peter Mistelish. Next up will be Mr. Schlechter.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name's Peter Mistelish. I lived in Hastings now for 10 years. I have two boys, 8 and 10. They're in 2nd and 4th grade. And I'm just going to speak to the turf issue alone. I know this is a hot button. I'm just going to jump right to it because this, I hope 1 and 2 pass, but I wanted to talk about the turf. The turf, this turf's not right. We can do a lot better. You know, I like how you put up the slide about the history of Hastings in 1986, and you can look this up, but there's a New York Times article about the school wanted to sell half of Burke for condominiums and townhomes. And the community came together using phrases like, it's the crown jewel of Hastings, it's our Central Park. And now, to borrow from Joni Mitchell, we are going to pave paradise and put up 2 green plastic carpets. And I don't think this is the legacy and the best thing for students. Now, I love sports. My kids love sports. There's a better way to do this. Any serious athlete will tell you that the best of the best is grass. No legitimate athlete wants to play on artificial turf. The NFL Players Association, 92% of them wants to play on grass. It's going to be part of the collective bargaining agreement. In Major League Baseball, only 5 of 30 stadiums are on grass, are turf, and they're all in domed stadiums. FIFA is bringing its World Cup 2026 next year. They're going to play some of them in the NFL stadiums that have turf. They are forcing them to convert them to grass fields for the duration of the tournament. Okay? Grass is less expensive. There are more injuries on turf. I know the opposite is being said, but this is just simply not true. And of a particular note is there is no such thing as a PFAS-free synthetic turf. There's no such thing. Make no mistake. that an artificial turf field will have toxic chemicals. Portsmouth, New Hampshire just went through this. They had meetings like we had, and over 2 years, they had specs, and they said, this has to be PFAS-free, this has to be PFAS-free, this has to be PFAS-free. They installed the turf, they did independent testing. Guess what the turf has? Toxic chemicals. It has PFAS, okay? There are dozens, there is a litany of lawsuits, class action lawsuits, about misinstalled turf that lasts 2 years, 6 years. The injury rates, there's a reason that pro athletes don't want to play on this stuff. And a properly maintained, there has to be something in between a proper, a turf field, which we're paying $37 per square foot to install, versus proper drainage, proper maintenance. There are tarps, there are crew. There has to be something in between. I mean, consider what's happening with the baseball field. We're not turning that into turf. So what did they put in its place? Sand slit drainage at $1.25 a square foot. When asked to do the cost analysis comparison, which thank you for putting that up there, because that was very important to see it side by side over years, that's $1 million difference, and that's only based on a $1.7 million field. We're spending $3.8 million on fields, and that's compared against new grass construction. We have grass fields. We have an oasis, as Alex said, in Burke. Let's not pave it over. Let's not ruin it. Grass fields is properly drained and maintained. Grass fields is the best of the best. Our kids need the best. That is the best. That's why when you go to Yankee Stadium and you walk down the tunnel and you see the grass and you see the dirt, that's the thing that athletes want to play on. That's what matters. We can do that. There's no reason. In the cost analysis, someone said that it would be, we have to hire someone extra. Well, how much extra? In between the 3.8 million. 3.8 million for turf fields. There's a way to spend a lot less than that.
Thank you. But if you have a question, certainly, but...
The question is, why was nothing presented in terms of drainage or in terms of hiring extra staff? Why was that never presented by land or PDPW or anything like that as an alternative?
Sure.
That's the question.
So, you could, Bobby, if you want to sign up, Bobby, just sign up to speak. And Matt can speak to this in a moment. One of the things we looked at was to see, is there anything really unusual going on with this field? We had sort of the urban legend is that there's a lot of bedrock, it doesn't drain properly, that might be part of it. We did 32 different sample cores around there to sort of see what's what. And what Lan described to us, and Matt can speak to in a moment, is the real root problem is overuse of the grass by the number of teams that are there. Climate and overuse of grass. Let's get that. The other question was about groundspeople. We could spend out of our budget with very little state reimbursement. We do a lot of the things that we top seed, we overseed, we aerate, we fertilize, we do these things, and we still have the problem. So could we do more? Yes. Would it come out of our budget? Yes. When we talk to colleges about how much money they put into their marquee grass fields, it's much, much more than even what's on that slide. So that's college money. We're a small school district, so it's not really in our wheelhouse. But I'll let Matt speak a little bit to why the fields suffer.
Well, two things. Can we go back to the slide with the analysis between the two? This is a slide that the LA group prepared on behalf of the school district that talks about a maintenance model. If you look at the grass cost and cancellations at $500 per event times 10 events per year, that would be $5,000. The school district spends $700 to $1,000 per cancellation, and they had 70 cancellations last year. So that's an example slide, but that would be nearly $50,000 rather than the $5,000 that's up there. To add to the maintenance cost to fully maintain a field like this to the standards of pro football teams, pro sports teams, it would really close the gap. So what we did was the fairest way, the operating budget of a traditional school district in traditional circumstances, within the means of their normal budget. If we were to use the examples that you're using, it just makes the argument that caring for grass and not having alternate solutions when you have a community that needs to be able to use the fields, needs to be able to rest the fields with the weather conditions you have, and needs to have options to provide the community the best outcome, the best access to their facilities, that it really just closes the financial gap, and I think it sort of neutralizes this concern about we're overspending on something that isn't going to be used by everybody. This is a field this is a facility, a school district that will have both natural grass and artificial turf if they were to approve the bond. And the cost to maintain grass fields at the standards that you're suggesting are not affordable.
Yeah,
And the use that you need, things that are out of your control are the weather. And so this gives you options to play when you have adverse weather, like we've had 20 days of rain in the last 35 days, and spring sports like Little League and your softball and baseball teams can't play here. So it gives this school district an opportunity to host competitions, interscholastic competitions on their home fields, rather than playing them at away facilities. It gives you the option of artificial turf to stay here. It gives you the option of grass to stay here. And it gives the community access to the facilities for recreational purposes.
So, yeah,
It doesn't. You can play on turf during the rain.
you can play on,
Well, just the final of the softball tournament yesterday.
We played our regional softball game today on a turf field in the rain, and we were able to protect.
so,
I know, but it was
Yeah.
canceled because of the rain, because it was supposed to be yesterday.
so,
Interpret like.
we want to try and be helpful this way if we could. So, sign up, ask the questions, we'll respond. It's a very good question. You've opened up the opportunity to speak and clarify a number of points. So first off, I think as Matt said, the comparison here on turf grass isn't into a professional economic framework at all. No, I listened fully. I'd asked the opportunity to respond fully. You've had a very informed response from Matt. We looked thoroughly at all of this. We did not lightly go down this path. That's also why of the 7 fields, we're keeping 5 natural grass. Within the educational sector, higher ed, independent school, parochial schools, public schools, on that economic model, not a professional sports model, you find a mixed approach. If you go all the way through the best Division III league in the nation, New England Small College Conference, Amherst, Bates, Tufts, go down the list, Conn College, they all have a mixed model. They have a natural grass model because they need to rest that field. They also have the turf model, and increasingly going for as green an approach as possible. The PFAS point is an excellent point. We are looking at that. We are going to avoid, if this bond passes in the design phase, in the speccing for the particular product, we are going to do everything we can to avoid that exact problem you and others have constructively raised. But I would ask that it is not a professional sport economic model. Higher, I'm going to repeat myself because it's so important, higher in all those educational institutions I've mentioned, they can afford to do a mixed approach. They cannot spend the $500,000 per field that's estimated to keep it up and functional. They need the mixed approach. So that's where we've done that modestly. A number of years ago, which Maureen can speak to, we did do an investment in these fields on the grass model, but due to usage and climate change and all the rest, we cannot maintain what we have. So that's why we're being modest here and saying 2 turf fields, 5 natural grass fields. It's an approach that's used in thousands of educational institutions and works, and we're going to try and minimize that PFAS problem that you've raised.
I think you just,
Okay.
I think what we're alluding to is the last bond that we did on the fields did expand the number of fields, and we have been resting and rotating and all the rest, overseeding, aerating. I think I don't want to get too far down the road about, as Alex said, there is a difference between bond money and operational money, and in terms of building in the staffing necessary to maintain the fields, even with the additional staffing, I still think, rest is rest on fields, and you really, I think, as much as I think it is served us, as long as we can with the last bond, we are finding ourselves back with the same issues, and that's why, again, it's not as though we have experience. with grass fields, with resting them, with rotating them, and then we're still finding ourselves with the same issues that we've been experiencing since the last bond. And as Dr. McCurshey said, I think we are proposing a mixed model, and the fact that, again, the professional sports teams, we understand they're different than schools, but as Alex referenced, we will be the only school in Westchester County, and that's not to say it's not because they're trying to outdo each other, it's just realistically, there's only so much property and land in Lower Westchester. We're not, sometimes even places in the Dutchess and Orange and some of those counties, they do have a little bit more land, and even there you find where they will have at least 1 or 2 turf fields in that mix. So again, it's something I think we have a good understanding of how we've tried to maintain our grass fields, and we do find ourselves in need of something to supplement.
Thank you. Who's next?
Mr. Schlechter, possibly Mr. Skolnick after.
Mr.
Next. He said next. He's just giving you a heads up. You're on deck. Yeah.
On deck.
You're on deck.
I've been asked to speak again because...
Can you just raise the mic a little closer? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I've been asked to speak again because many people have younger kids and talk about hypotheticals, or they've read an article about professional athletes. Both of my daughters are in the system, and they actually do play or have played varsity athletics. So I'm in the here and now. And I know there's exceptions out there where someone says, well, I know a player who liked this or what have you, but all the things I'm speaking about, whether it's lacrosse, softball, field hockey, soccer, I'm speaking about the vast majority of the players out there in the here and now. And again, I'm focused on the 13 to 22-year-olds out there, the kids who are playing in high school and the kids who want to continue on. In the past couple of meetings, there were just a couple of points I want to hit on that people brought up, and I just wanted to clarify because I think there was a little misinformation out there. First of all, the board can correct me if I'm wrong, but for anybody out there with young kids in Hillside or who just do not like anything synthetic, as far as I know, phys ed does not require anyone to touch the turf. Is that true?
Correct.
So what we're talking about is a couple of fields that are optional for competitive varsity and JV athletes. So if you're someone who doesn't like chlorine, no one's making you join the swim team. So that's kind of a point there that I just want to let people know who do have a concern. Phys ed is excluded from this, which is a non-optional activity. We covered on the professional fields a little bit. I mean, I'd love my backyard to look like Yankee Stadium also, but the maintenance and everything just really isn't an option. And just to give an example for the younger professional athletes out there, my daughter attended the Casey Current Gotham game over at Sports Illustrated Field. And one of the stars in Casey Current is a 19-year-old named Claire Hutton, who's a recent alumni of my daughter's soccer academy. And the reason why she made Casey Current and gets to play on a nice grass field that's professionally maintained is that she logged 10,000 hours on turf playing academy ball to get to that point. And that's true of most of your professional athletes and collegiate athletes under the age of 25. Someone brought up the 2016 state championship that we won. I was there. It was great. We didn't win because of grass. We won despite grass. And several of the players on that team, who I know personally, play academy ball and logged their 10,000 hours in turf and then went on. You know who wants turf more than anybody? The coach of that championship team. For 25 years, he's been asking for turf. I mean, you can't think of anyone who could speak better to that championship than the coach. Who also wants turf is the captain of that team, Oscar Pereira, who went on to play at West Point, which, guess what, has turf fields. The injuries were brought up because my daughter, prior to playing soccer, was a ball girl for Hastings. And I can't tell you the number. It's kind of funny, but kind of not. Trainers would have to carry double the tape because when they came to Hastings, all the visiting teams lamented that their knees and their ankles had to get double taped because of the indentations in the field. Turned ankles, sprained ankles are a dime a dozen. This isn't professional. It's getting 30 times the leg traffic of a professional field. Even the refs would joke that the crabgrass deserved a yellow card because of how many people were falling with nobody near them. The final point I want to make is that regardless of where you are on the budget consideration or the synthetic material aspect, you're not reducing your children's exposure to the synthetic material. All of the teams in Section 1 have turf. They will be playing their games on turf. If we practice only on grass, guess what? Those same athletes are going to ask their parents, like my daughter does, to drive them to another town to log another hour and a half to practice on synthetic material, which is a lot worse and older than anything we're talking about here, so they can prepare for their games. So you're not reducing it. It would be the same analogy as if Hastings only wanted typewriters in all of our libraries. You're not stopping your kids from using computers. You're just forcing them to have to go elsewhere to log the time on the computers that they need. So that's my final statement. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Skolnick, next up, Kathy Sullivan.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi, guys. I want to first just have you remind me what the email address, because I'm not going to go through all the questions that I have, but you did give me an address last time.
bond@hohschools.org.
Okay. Right. So of the items, I mean, one of the questions, I guess that, let me know if I'm having the mic too close.
That's good.
With regard to the fields, you're emphasizing that only 2 would be turf and the others would still be grass. But I'm just experiencing some amount of confusion as to what would be happening. I'm not even sure which of those 5 are grass. I know that Reynolds is grass. I know that,
So Reynolds, football team stays on grass, it would be at Reynolds. The Upper Burke would become artificial turf, and the little practice field, I can show the picture again, the little practice field that's low on the northwest corner would become the turf softball field.
right, that's Burke.
Two at Burke.
So the question is, if grass is well, there's Reynolds, and right now Reynolds is not anywhere in this process, as far as I gather.
You mean for turf? No.
No, but I mean in terms of any kind of upgrade. If
I mean, part of the rationale, if 2 out of the, and we're still going to be counting the hillside, so that gets you up to the
It
7.
would stay as a field.
So, but the wear and tear, the upkeep will be easier on the 5 fields than on 7, and the resting of fields. So all 5 are going to, the 5 natural grass will benefit from the 2 being artificial.
So is there any, again, I'm sort of staying with the fields, is there any further understanding besides resting as to the way they were addressed in the previous effort, why there remained problems, and what you would be willing to do to, I mean, you're going to be doing something with the baseball field, which didn't get, apparently wasn't treated right the first time.
Right, can I just, sort of what David said, you can keep it, so what David's sort of summarizing is that these fields have been done a lot and never quite worked since they were first put in, and there's a question of, well, why aren't they working properly? Because I think, again, I don't know if it's urban legend, but there was, the first time that the Burke State was cleared, the Burke State always had a clear area, but the woods through it were cleared, I forget what year. The first time they were cleared, it was not really done right. And so are we sort of, is there a fundamental problem? I think it's what you're getting at underneath that, and have we looked into it? And just, from the previous question, we did 32 sample cores around the fields to see how deep the bedrock is, if there's any sort of issues. And so we have done some research, and we've ascertained that the field it's a healthy field. It should be able to support common play. There's no fundamental reason for it. But to your other point, it's certainly an open thing where we would continue to look into things at Reynolds or the other fields, what could make them function better even as grass fields. I think that's what you're getting at a little bit, right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to belabor it. It's just basically the question, the larger question I've had is, and has come up before, you do this, what is whether it's in the building, of the number of classrooms that are undersized, or what are we still looking at? What is it that of the problems that you've outlined will still remain after you've done this?
Gotcha. So if you're talking about the building, from a size standpoint, we feel confident that this is the minimum amount of space that we can add that's going to be very functionally, make the school much more functional. The board doesn't have any expectation that, okay, as soon as this passes, we need to talk about adding more space. There's a fundamental lack of space, but we feel like these new classrooms, they're larger, we can move things into them, they free up the next set of largest classrooms for things that need more space to move into them. So we're pretty confident that this is looking ahead to the 20 years of the bond, this is sort of a sustainable model for the bond. There's no, on that side. On the field side, because we've determined that the main issue is overuse, especially using it marginally if it's still damp, that to have the two artificial turf fields where we can sort of sequester play to let the fields rest when they need to, that's kind of a force multiplier for the entire set of fields. That's helpful.
Okay.
I'll note on the building side, the next kind of phase that PBW had outlined in our master plan, which, the board has not committed to or not, but what we had identified was program swap areas as the next phase. So the ability to free up the space in the third floor Washington wing for classrooms and move the cafeteria allows the school to be able to regularize their department locations, which are now quite disparate throughout the school. So that's able to be done, mostly within school budget, as they generally do each year. They've been doing it in a very compressed space because of the lack of space. So this kind of unlocks that next phase where they're able to take on that work, within a regular summer school budget, as they wish to as well. But I would say the biggest items that aren't solved are the middle school doesn't have teacher offices. And so the board has really prioritized the classroom space and the student spaces in this bond, and really made a big effort to try to address that first and foremost, because that is the biggest issue. But yeah, none of the middle school classrooms none of the middle school departments will have offices after this.
Okay, thanks. So the idea is how many classrooms will still remain below the state determined size once you've done this?
The ones that are too small will remain too small. I mean, there's no,
Right,
there
so
would be still 19.
we'll still have that number.
So it would be, instead of 19 of 24, it would be 19 of 30, let's put it that way. Or back out special ed, because that's a different classification.
Well,
so 19, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, by also moving the science classrooms up to the new floor, so you get new science regulated size classrooms on the third floor of the Washington wing, and the current science classrooms for the middle school are the largest of the classrooms in the middle school. So you also get to use those for larger spaces. So the rest of the classrooms stay as they are. It's how the building is, it's how the building's built, but you're kind of able to move into bigger spaces because of that freeing up.
Yeah, and to the point, so let's say you have a room that's undersized by state standards. Let's say it's 600 currently and it's trying to hold an ICT class. If you move that into a 680 room, it's still undersized by state standards, but there's more space. So things that require space, it gives us a chance to move them to larger spaces. Because the science rooms, the current ones, are the only full set that are above state standards. Those are larger because they're science rooms. So if we repurpose them, those are actually above state standards. Those are the 6 that are, the 5 that are currently above.
Yeah, I mean, the final comment I make, and your questions are very helpful, is it underscores that this board over 2 years really fine-tuned this down to the greatest needs. There is more work to be done, and there isn't a plan to go racing back out for a bond. There's more work to get done, but it's prioritized. 2 fields, period, no lights. Classrooms, adding the 6, and knowing we could do more, but the board saying, let's keep this tight and focused. Similarly, so there's a real move of efficiency here based on lots and lots of listening to the residents. So there's a lot more that someday may need to get done. There is nothing hidden back there. Do not hear that. Hear rather 2 years of very intensive work, listening to the public, winnowing this down to what is the critical needs. And to do that, to respect very much this balancing act of need versus taxpayer concerns.
Thank you.
Kathy Sullivan, next up, Mr. Lemons.
Hello, my name is
Good evening.
Hi, hello, thank you. I'm Kathy Sullivan. I'm an architect. I've been on the planning board. I've been the chair of the comprehensive plan. I also was maybe one of the first women to be a rec basketball coach back in the day, and we won some tournaments. And I've also have a son who was an athlete who went through the system. He ran D3 cross country and track, but he was a senior and the track was condemned. So I sympathize with people who have to deal with facilities. However, I'm not here to talk about that. I wanted to thank the board for being receptive to some of my questions. I see some of the things that I've mentioned showing up here, so I appreciate that. I'd like to focus in on a couple of things. One thing I should mention, I grew up with a brother who was, because of Minnesota's enlightened policies, he was disabled and he was able to go to public school till he was 21. So I'm sympathetic and appreciate the mothers here who are fighting for what they want their kids to get. I'd like to ask one question about the special ed. It was mentioned that one of the plans before what was shown as the bond plan shows labs, science labs, but that was also classrooms and offices for special ed. I'd like the board to address how that's being dealt with, where it's being dealt with. I also want to thank the superintendent for preparing that lovely FAQ about the combination of the bond work that's happening and the work that's happening in Farragut. I have just one question about that, which is what are the other spaces in the basement going to be? There's a mention of a couple of classrooms for special needs kids. I'm a mathematician, but not by any means I have a math degree, but I have a love of figuring out things, and some of the problems I've had have been the use of a percentage. And I just want to focus in on the cafeteria because the cafeteria's height and what it's used for has been under discussion. I want to make one comment about that before, but the percentage saying that the cafeteria is half the size it should be, and that is fine. But you don't know what you're talking about and how many kids are actually going to be served, how many kids can seat in that cafeteria, how that's going to improve the situation. So I'd like to know how the cafeteria at the size that it is going to stop the congestion, stop the kind of crazy life that these kids have when it comes to lunch. Because I don't know how you're going to manage that, how many periods are going to be, how many kids are going to be coming. So I'd like that to be addressed. I also like to share a possible plan B if that's what happens. And one would be not to say we don't have one, but one that might focus in on the repairs that are left behind, because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in the schools to bring them up to be safe places. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Regarding the cafeteria, I think, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks. I'll comment on a few of the questions, but I'll first preface to say that these are all good points that we get into further when we get into design. So this is at the conceptual stage now, and all of those will be vetted further as we get further and further into design if this does get approved. The first point about the special education spaces that were originally outlined on the third floor of the Washington wing, we've assessed that where they're actually able to be more spread out throughout the school so that they're more accessible throughout the school instead of just focused on the third floor of the Washington wing, because really the issue is the space issue. Once you reprogram that space for science, other areas of the building open up for special education rooms. To your second point about the flood, we've introduced on each floor of the Farragut wing a small group instructional space, which would be used for that. So that's been already part of the plan of the flood updates. The cafeteria question, I mean, that's something that I think is still under discussion with the district. We don't plan on, as far as I know, expanding the number of lunch periods, so it's really trying to fit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
We'll follow.
Okay.
We're ready to follow. Go
So the real issue is addressing middle school lunch. And middle school lunch right now happens where there's 20 minutes for fifth graders to eat, then 20 minutes outside, 20 minutes for sixth graders to eat, then 20 minutes outside. Same thing for seventh and eighth graders. So you're dealing with 2 lunch periods that really try to compress 4 into 2 lunch periods. And that's why access to food is so important, and being able to quickly get your food is so important. So it's not just the number of students that are seated, it's also the flow of the space. But we do have numbers on the number of students that are seated. Really, you'd want about 250 for that period for middle school, and we'd be providing 288 when you're kind of really packed in. So we have analyzed that, and we know that fits and works.
If I could, just,
Of course.
there's one other facet of the cafeteria design related to congestion. Kathy, insightful question. The central corridor has a vertical stairwell at the back of it that provides access into the cafeteria as it is at the Washington wing now. That vertical stairwell connects the auditorium and the library at the 4th and 3rd floor levels, both assembly spaces where large amounts of students pass through, where students are also accessing into the cafeteria during the same bell period. And so that's the kind of congestion where we're trying to move the cafeteria to a different location that isn't accessed through a stair tower that creates some of these congestion concerns that you have while kids are queuing up to get their lunch. And so it's a complex problem. It's not just solved by space. It perhaps is solved by operational changes that the school district could probably comment on better than I could.
So it's an excellent question. I'm going to purposely stand up because if there's students here, they know they see me in that cafeteria a lot. All right, and I think what Alex has done earlier in my setting him up said the kind of detail as a parent and board member can share. The key issue here is we will get 20% more space overall, but this is the incredible bottleneck. Rob, you can confirm this even though you're a high schooler. Here is an incredible bottleneck. Some 200 students trying to get in and out here. 200 students getting in and out here. Yeah. Scott went upon arriving as an expert middle school principal. Dan Waldeck, coming out of Wagner School in New York City, said, I've not seen such a potential loud jam and a potential risk to safety. This is a serious problem. In my 4 years here, we monitor with a person here to manage the flow of all those children going down 3 flights of stairs to get to recess and up. It's a big management flow problem. Yes, there's that sloppy picture in the slide of stuff around. We monitor carefully. So the flow problem here is gigantic. I have stood there as a 6'5" person. Thank goodness I'm 6'5" because it's a crazy mess, but good, we have monitors. The other problem is we're trying to get students to get their food in this incredibly tight space, which is literally about the space here. Imagine 200 students coming through trying to get their food, and it's good food. It is good food. So they're trying to come through and get their food, and it's well priced, by the way. They're coming in to get that food, and that's the source of the line and the compression. For middle schoolers who do not necessarily have a choice to go out and about, the high schoolers have a choice, so they dodge it. They dodge it. So yes, we'll get more free space here. and we're going to solve a very big problem, because the construction issues here, and Matt, you can speak to that, to reconfigure that, and where would it go? Plus, you have an outdated kitchen that needs hundreds of thousands of dollars investment. So this is all part of the analysis that's gone on now for about 18 to 20 months to say, give us classrooms back here, solve this crowded flow problem by creating this new cafeteria space in an unused part of the courtyard. And I hope my physical presence here helps, because I would not eat if I didn't have, I'm not trying to be light. That's how serious it is in the flow there, particularly for our middle schoolers. A fifth grader comes out of this lovely space that you all helped create. You helped create this space. And they go up there now, down there. This is what we're trying to solve.
I just want to add one thing, because we are focusing only on flow in and out of the cafeteria, flow within the cafeteria, or accessibility. I mean, I think something that we really loved about the plan that we presented was it starts to kind of regularize this maze of a building that I've had experience in, that I think anyone who's walked into the building has experienced. Like, people's first comments of the building is they get lost and they have no idea where they are. And that's, I think, across the board. And so by locating the cafeteria in the kind of heart of the building and connecting it both from the middle school ground floor and the new entry, and also connecting it from the high school lobby, it really starts to make a center for the school and starts to kind of regularize circulation throughout the building, not just within each of these discrete spaces.
Thank you.
Would it be possible just to let us know what the occupancy of the cafeteria is intended to be as it's shown on the plans? What how many kids would be seated there?
386 is maximum if you divide it by 15, the square footage. But that's a maximum based on code. For seating wise, that's based on your tables.
Not to say, you've got, what, 386, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the maximum amount of people you can fit into that room, seatings and chairs. And so that's the code maximum. But with chairs and tables set up, you have objects to work around. That's, you would reduce the amount of people you could actually service and have seated in the cafeteria with tables and chairs.
No, we're talking about
That's the proposed cafeteria. In the existing, the square footage.
It's 3,800?
3,800.
3,800, I believe. No, but just for his calculations.
253. So you're going from 253 to 380, what did you say, 386?
Thank you.
Mr. Lemons?
The high school, you're seating, we have 400.
Next up, Mr. Skwierderski.
Good evening.
Good evening, Alex. Thank you for that really excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Reflects a lot of work and development. You're a good educator.
Thank you.
I would hire you. So I want to speak out of kind of a historical context on two things. First one has to do with the field. And kind of the starting point is starting for both of the things I'd like to say is 2013. So, there was a really contentious bond in 2013 that had to do with Reynolds Field and other building repairs that needed to be done. And one of the proposals that was initially made by the board in 2013 was to extend the tennis court, to cut the trees where the Reynolds Field playground is, and put that playground out in the middle of that bare spot that's next to it. And I have to say, I live close to there, and every time I walk by there and I see dozens of kids out there playing, particularly when it's hot and it's shaded under those, I'm very happy that that's not what happened. But I recognize that was a trade-off, because there was one less tennis court. That would have helped with the tennis team, I'm sure, in matches and practice. It was a trade-off. So it was it's a sort of a value question, really. And it's not that either side of choosing on that value is right or wrong by default, but it is a question of values, and that one for me just seems so clear. The fields are really very similar, because probably we could debate a lot about injuries and whether more or less, and I just wouldn't get into that discussion, because I think there are things to be said on both sides, and there always probably will be. But one of the things that, to me, I think comes down to the value question is that it is a field of plastic that we're talking about as opposed to grass. And that, I understand the new specification calls for recyclability, but to quote the great philosopher Jackson Brown, every bit of plastic that's ever made is still with us, or it's gone up in smoke. And these plastic fields, there have been probably something like 1,500 a year of them since 2013, taken out of commission and stacked up in fields and warehouses. And I'm still waiting for evidence that there's any significant, if any, recycling of any fields. I know there's a company that has been talked about a lot recently that claims that, but the link on their website to what they're actually doing is dead. And if you follow it, what I found, I looked really hard, but I followed it just looking with Google, and I found a 2022 page where there was a promise of that happening for 50 fields in California, but I assume it hasn't, because there's just nothing there. So that may be, for some of us, that is going to be okay. That's going to be a trade-off that we can live with, because we think the gains are there. But I'm one of those that's not going to be happy with that trade-off, because I just think we got too much plastic in this world, and adding to it isn't going to be great. Another thing, a question I think on the estimates of costs. What I've seen in terms of artificial turf fields is that maintenance is not insignificant, and it's more than what you showed there. And I also think, I'm wondering, and I don't know, because this was kind of new information here, when we talk about the cost of moving for canceled games, is that number for one field, or is that for all the fields? Because I think that would make a difference too, right, in terms of actually making that a per field cost. So I don't know the answer to that, but that's just a question. So the other thing that I wanted to say, and this goes back to our 2013 experience. And obviously we've had a lot of different ways of looking at not just the field, but particularly what's in the second proposal. And many questions asked in many directions. You addressed a bunch of them tonight, Alex. They're going to be questions that remain. And one thing I guess I do want to challenge about what you said, but hopefully it's in a positive way, and that is that what happened in 2013 is that bond was defeated. And immediately there was a big engagement with the community, and there was a lot of discussion that went on. There were community workshops that were held, and what came out of that was a new bond. And before I came tonight, I was digging through my files. I found an old Enterprise that had a letter that I had written on behalf of people that had opposed the first bond, and underneath it was a letter from then school board chair. And we were both endorsing that second bond, and it passed by 1,000 to 200 and some against. So, and that happened fairly quickly. That happened within a few months. So we don't know what the outcome is going to be of this vote that we're going to have. Everybody's now going to weigh in on this. But I know my intention, and I think I can say that for the group of us who have been in really questioning propositions 2 and 3. The intention is to move forward, and if these don't pass, we expect another round and to move forward and not to have a huge delay, and I think that's very possible. And we don't know what's going to happen, but that is what I'm intending.
Thank you. So just to address that, as I brought it up, in 2013, you had a sort of a natural binary, right? It was grass, people wanted artificial turf on one side and a grass model on the other. And so when the turf failed, it was natural to move to, and the track, right, to move to the other choice. So there were kind of two choices. There is no clear, I think we've made quite clear, for the requirements, the fact that we're meeting them really at a minimum, the fact that there's every expectation the prices will go up. There's no real other thing there on the other side. If you were saying, well, we want it to be different, that would be a different thing, right? But the heart of it has always been do it differently, but do it for less. And that's really the linchpin. There is no thing there. Again, to do it for less, you just do less of it. But it's already scoped to such a minimum that I just don't know, I'm not trying to make light of it, but there's really, there's no thing there, If we had a sense that, oh, you know what, New York State's going to be flush with something in 2 years and they're going to give us a lot more money, we would transition, we wouldn't be doing it now. But there's no real thing there. And Ruby, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, for the building portion, I almost want to say this is round 2 that the board did, because they had scoped something else that was a Band-Aid. And I think the school, in being fiscally responsible, has really addressed issues with Band-Aids for a long time. And so when they engaged us, they realized that we can't do this anymore. It's not solving our issues. And it's just tacking onto them and not really getting to the structural problem of it. And so they said, hold on, let's not go through with this proposal. Let's back up and really understand the issues. And that's when we went through the comprehensive master planning, where we heard from teachers, this is the first time in 30 years they've ever been asked any of these questions about the building. And we went into that not with a design idea in mind, we went into that just to listen and understand what the problems are and be able to kind of unlock the building and the future of the building for Hastings.
I would also just add that a lot of the things, the goals that I think people share, perhaps look different, save a little money, those are all things that are included in the design process. Those are goals, those can be goals of the design process. We kind of had a preliminary conversation about how those things might be achieved. So, I would just say personally as a trustee, if there will be movement towards some of these goals in the design process. And so I don't think that voting something down to spur a new process is necessary personally, because there is a process that's going to come and reasonably address the concerns on a reasonable level. If you think it could be 10% less expensive, perhaps that can be done. But to say that we're going to solve the same scope of problems with something dramatically different than that down the road is just, it's not very persuasive, frankly, for this.
Alex, can I just, I'll add one thing. I wasn't a part of the 2013 referendum, not part of the community at all. And so as an outsider, I get to hear, through your message, through these forums. And I'm on my 8th or 9th referendum. Alex, this is your first one. You still have plenty of hair. Go through a few more and you'll end up looking like me, at least from a hair standpoint. But what I would say is that this issue emerged in 2013, and here we are 12 years later. And the issue is still the same. It's a use issue. There's just not enough access to the facility and the ability to maintain the facility to the standard the school district needs to maintain for good, suitable interscholastic competition and to provide the recreational resources for the community. So the balance of a mixed model with natural grass and artificial turf, it works well in Westchester. I've said this coming from an upstater sort of perspective. The Minnesinks, the Warwicks, some of the other Hudson Valley school districts that have acreage of land. The other solution, the plan B, is to buy more land, but you likely don't have that as an option here. And so as we look at your master plan, we look at the map, and we look at the town, and we say to ourselves, how do you solve that other problem? And probably coming back to the table with the same solution. Unfortunately, for the people who are opposed to artificial turf, it's probably the best solution for an urban school district. And that's why you're seeing the trend over the last 10 to 20 years of Westchester moving until Hastings is the last holdout of school districts without turf, artificial turf.
Dan, it's a great question, and I'm going to do a super quick history of the last 18, 24 months, and you'll check me on this. This is so important. There were a variety of ideas from the board to say, how can we most cost-effectively get classroom space and break this log jam that hopefully I acted out a little bit. The video that may have seen is very accurate. I'm not talking fields right now, I'm talking the core of what we need every single day for our students. There was an idea to do an expansion down over here by the athletics area, change some classrooms around, do something over here. That was an idea. There was an idea of putting something on top of the Washington Bridge here. Structurally, it will not work. That was thought about. Above here is the redone auditorium. I was not here when that was decided. It was decided that could not become anything but what it is currently for load-bearing reasons and all the rest. So we looked up, if I'm acting this out. No windows, thank you. There's no windows, and it's sloped. All right, we looked at potentially adding something out here. So hopefully this acting out shows you that the core jam here, this big problem we have is not going to be solved. So the Band-Aid phrasing, that was Band-Aiding. We'd just be stretching the problem out and not solving it here. So the decision was, for as cost-effective as possible, break this log jam, get 6 classrooms, you get to an unused courtyard with a space, done, and good questions about what more to get done later someday. That gives you flexibility to do these other things. But if you just keep tacking on out here, you don't solve the core problem, and it would cost as much to do all of that. So I think that was the 18 months of effort. So if you go back to the drawing board and what Alex is saying, for here, we don't know what's left on the drawing board. And this access issue is critical from an ADA and security standpoint. So that's at least on that side.
I just want to make a comment also about going back to the drawing board on the design of the facade. And we almost regret putting something out there that looks final for the design of the facade, because it's really not. It's conceptual. And it's put out there, I think if you go to the interior shot of the cafeteria, the idea that it's trying to convey is, let's try to bring in as much natural light as possible into this space and expose students to views to the exterior as a visual cue, similar to here, going from lunch to the play yard outside. And that's really what it's meant to express. Frankly, we need a lot more design fee to get into exactly what the exterior of the building looks like, and we really hope to be able to do that if it passes.
Can I just add, as you spurred my memory, we had asked, so, I mean, not that SHPA would approve it, but let's say we did the same brick and window facade on the cafeteria, how much possible savings would it be? I believe, Matt, it was about 150 grand or...
Yeah, it works out to be about like 1.5% of...
Right, and it would be obviously much darker and all sorts of stuff, but the point is, there's not a lot of wiggle in the material side of things. It would be, again, for the cost of the cafeteria, it would change it about 1.5%, and it would be darker, we would light it more. I mean, the point is, we have looked at these things.
Yeah, I think it's likely that we're going to end up, with some masonry elements in there, with a masonry base, I think we'll likely be going towards there. And like Alex said, design will be part of what we get into with the board, and there'll be feedback and whatnot. But I think in terms of conveying the idea of this is an internal courtyard that's north-facing, and let's try to capture as much natural light as possible and open up as much views as possible is really what we were trying to get at.
I would also add that the cost is something that I've received a lot of feedback on, and perhaps a lot of criticism. We've helped assist the school district with developing a cost estimate and a budget forecast, and people have really hung their hats on $1,000 per square foot and saying, that's too luxurious. What you're not seeing is the breakdown of what that cost also includes. So an entrance addition at $850 a square foot in comparison to a cafeteria at $1,000 per square foot, that $150 a square foot includes collateral impact to the building. There's over $1 million of collateral impact to the building that's not in the 8,500 square feet of new space. You will be affecting multiple other spaces in the building. We'll be modifying and adapting multiple other systems in the building. You'll be making landscape improvements outside of the building that are all factored into that $1,000 per square foot. When we put the MEP system cost estimate up, that includes 6 line items for Hillside Elementary School. It includes 15 line items for Farragut Middle School, High School. We didn't give you the breakdown of every single element that goes into the individual line items. So I just want to be really careful when we forecast the cost of $1,000 per square foot, and we tell you that the industry standard at new construction is $850 per square foot for K-12 facilities. That $150 a square foot delta includes a lot of collateral impact to the building that's just not spelled out to you. So before you get hung up in this is really expensive. At $850 a square foot in today's dollar, that is the going market in K-12 facilities for new construction in Westchester. It's not affluent, it's not out of date, it's not unusual for what we're seeing in the market in terms of trending and forecasting for projects right now.
And I'll say, I'm really glad that there's allowance for that specifically for the green space outside, because green space is generally the first thing to get cut from any building project, and it's really key for this project, that green space outside. So I'm glad that the school district has accounted for that.
Thank you.
Alex,
Welcome.
excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like to say we're going to take some credit for dragging you along in the process of filling out and fleshing out these presentations to answer the questions that the community has had. And to some degree, it's a shame that the excellent presentation is 8 days before the vote. I've been hitting on the process issue now for every time I've had a chance to speak, and I'm getting tired of my own voice. I've been counting down the hours to 8 days from now, but it still holds. I think if we had these sort of discussions and presentations of your reasoning, there could have been a livelier discussion earlier on. And it should have happened, and that's water over the dam. I don't agree that discussions end with the bond vote, but I do hope that regardless of what happens on next Tuesday, if you win, great, but I hope subsequent bond votes have a process starting a whole lot earlier, where the public is engaged, not passively asking questions, but like this. And if that's the outcome of this unpleasant last 4 or 5 months, I'm not sure it's worth it, but I'll be happy with that. If you don't win on those two, don't assume it's over. I don't. However, there's actually 2 questions I do have. You haven't much mentioned much about all the renovation to what is essentially the devastated middle school. And we're talking about all the issues with the middle school, but essentially right now much of it is a shell. So this all seems a little weird and abstract to be talking about future classrooms in a building that's under dramatic renovation. And we just heard a hint that some additional spaces are being factored into the renovated space as it's being built out. I'd like to hear more and how that's being factored into your planning for this renovated cafeteria and other things?
Sure.
Because I think it's salient. Question one, and just question two, so they're not terribly linked, but you've referred to it a couple of times, so has the superintendent. The building survey identified $48 million worth of stuff. You've prioritized the $8 million that is in this bond plus soft costs of $3 million. But what that leaves is another 55 with soft costs of remaining issues identified. Could you talk to what you see as a timing on the bonds that you'll need to address those issues and how that affects your thinking about what other flexibility you have in adding more to this building, doing more, given how much maintenance load you still left to address?
Sure. I'll let them go in a second, but just to tee that up a little bit. In the BCS, you rate things by 4 levels, well, really 5 levels of criticality, 1, 2, 3, 4, and deferred. What we're tackling here is the really mission-critical stuff. Just because something's in the BCS that is ranked a 2 or 3 or 4, it doesn't mean they progress in criticality as they get older. It's just an inventory of what your district needs to keep an eye on. Small district, it's a small team. There are plenty of districts people come and go. There's no institutional knowledge of, hey, what do we need to keep an eye on here? So you might have something like, as I said, putting new striping on your parking lot or fixing the curbs. That might be a 4 or deferred work. It doesn't mean it's going to become a 1. So what we're really tackling here is the criticality, the DEFCON 1 type of stuff. So and they'll speak more to this, but there's no real sense that there's some deluge coming. As soon as these things get a little older, they're all going to mature to 1s. To the other question, which they can also handle, regarding the insurance, so there's a pretty minimal overlap between what we had planned in the bond and the damage in the Washington wing. There was about $1.5 million of true overlap, which the bond was reduced by. The insurance work is that building's going to be put back together by hopefully the fall, September. That's it. And the way insurance works, of course, is we don't get to say, well, actually, we're going to do all this totally different. We have some latitude to move things around a little bit, which is what they're going to reference. But that building's going to be pretty much what it was when it was. That's how insurance works. We can't add on top. So just those are quite separate time-wise. Nothing is going to happen if Prop 2 passes. The building work is going to be 18 months out. It's going to be well past when the Washington wing is already rehabilitated. But I'll let you guys speak to backfill on that.
Sure, I can just speak to the flood work, and which is all in the Farragut wing. To the yeah. I don't know if you can see over there. All over here, and that wing of the building on the first and second floors, so the top 2 levels, is almost fully classrooms. The top level of it is all 5th grade classrooms, and that's going to remain all 5th grade classrooms. The second level of it had the middle school office. The change that was proposed was, let's prioritize classroom space and move the middle school office down to the lowest level. And so that we can regularize classroom space. That was part of a program swap that was in the bond as well. So we did that with this flood insurance claim, and then the ground level then is more prioritized for office space and less classroom space. So,
Breakout rooms.
well, yes, sorry, small group instructional space. Yes.
I mean, I just want to be clear, it's not because I think this idea that we have all these additional offices being
No,
built. it's not
correct.
true.
There's no-
We're just flip-flopping the current middle school office, which is in a wing of classrooms, which was a classroom, putting it downstairs closer to a current entryway so that people don't have to traverse the building when they're going to see the principal, and it becomes a security issue for us. So there'll be basically an existing classroom will now become the middle school office, and then the other spaces are really special education resource room spaces.
Yes,
They're not offices.
there were some rooms that were closets, narrow closets under the stairs. And so we've shifted that. I mean, there were long, narrow closets under the stairs that all the teachers were like, this is such a waste of space. Why do we have these? And so we were able to enlarge those just slightly to make them into small group instructional spaces on each floor.
I would also add the insurance loss has given the school district an incredible opportunity to modernize the building, to modernize the wing, to modernize the building systems, to modernize the instructional environments, and to address BCS items. Over $1 million of items identified through the building condition survey through an insurance loss, and make that a more contemporary, modern learning environment.
Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Peter.
Mr. Gold. Next, Mr. Crowley.
Good evening.
Hi, and thank you for this. I originally got interested in the bond, I guess you could say, because of the artificial turf, because Dan and I worked on the Reynolds Field thing 10 years ago. But then looked at the rest of it and could kind of go either way on the cafeteria, the entrance. There was one thing I never understood about the entrance, and that's how it helps with accessibility through the building. And it seemed like the language early on, there was, I think, one board handout that said it resolves accessibility in the building. And now it says, if you really closely read it, it says the entrance itself is accessible. So I didn't understand how it helps the rest of the building, because you showed those red lines, which is a terrible way to live, to have to do that. I mean, I've been on crutches, I can't imagine in a wheelchair trying to get through all that. So, I mean, I sat down with Kathy one day at my dining room table. We went through the schematics to have her try to show me, how does this entrance fix these things? How does it get the kids around? And then last week I had a chance to talk to Alex for a minute, and he said that, in fact, it's essentially phase one of getting more access to the building. That the rest of it involves elevators. You need a couple more elevators. You need to extend an elevator to the basement. These whole other projects, which was news to me, and I think would be news to most of the community who thinks that we're solving all these access issues in the building. So, first off, I mean, I've been skeptical about the amount of money spent. I'm concerned about economic diversity in the community and pushing people out. I have to say, if we put in an elevator or two, I'd be willing to spend some money on that. So I first don't quite understand doing the entrance without working on the elevators inside the building once you get in. And then the second part of my question is, if this is the beginning, where are we going next? When is the next bond coming? How many millions of dollars will that be to get access? And it seemed like you indicated earlier the next bond is years away. So does that mean we're waiting years before some future generation of kids can get all the way around the building? Thanks.
Thank you. We're always trying not to spend things that we don't have to initially. So we don't really, this is a very, as anyone who's been in those buildings know, it's a complex warren of spaces with half levels. So an egress study, an accessibility study, that's something we weren't going to commit to ahead of time to do. And also just financially, an elevator, I think we said back in the envelope, each elevator is like $1 million, something like that. Just like with the lights, the lights would make the field time, it's an absolute huge multiplier for the field time. It's sort of the right thing to do. We even talked about in a meeting, why are we going to have fields without lights? It makes so much sense. But those lights are expensive, and, if we see it, if we need it, it'll come next. It's the same sort of thing with the elevators. We don't really know exactly what we're going to do because we haven't done these studies, and they are an expense. So yeah, it would absolutely be the right thing to do to plan it all out and put them all in. But it was an unknown, and it was a significant expense. So what we agreed was that the entryway itself, which is a very small expense, $940,000 in the scope of this stuff, it gives us sort of the leeway to go and say, okay, now we have an accessible building, so now we really have to make it actually accessible as deeply as we can. So it's a choice. Sure, I agree with you. I would love to do the elevators right now. And as far as timing, I don't know. We don't have any plans for another bond, but everybody else can speak to that.
Yeah, I just want to note, I think the board asked a question, I don't remember if it was December or November, somewhere before then. Can the cafeteria and entry, do they work together or can they be separated from each other? And, I think what all of us kind of collectively understood after discussing it was really they work in tandem with each other, because by providing that accessible entrance at that ground level and the cafeteria at that ground level, you kind of transform how people navigate the building and where they need to go in general. So you're completely changing the traffic flow throughout the building and the central spaces that people need to get to. So the entry and the cafeteria being on the same level just naturally transforms that. And so even without an elevator, there's a lot of kind of centrality in flow throughout the building that's resolved by those two together. I also want to note this red box that Alex has pointed out. I mean, we're saying this all conceptually, right? After going through an egress study and accessibility study, I mean, we kind of expect that's a perfect area to have an elevator there. That's something that if we can, we would want to do within the bond. And so that'd be something that we would be able to study further as we get into design.
Let me underscore what Rena said just from using the building. And again, this is all phased. This is a board that has taken a modest step. Not all the steps, but a modest step. Isn't clear what that next phase would be. But if this phase, with the entranceway and the flow inside, in fact, those around me know I've said, we can't just show the entranceway. We need to show this bird's eye view here of what happens, because Rena just put it beautifully. There is going to be more accessibility. Is it the ultimate? No. But it's going to be dramatically beyond what we currently have. And this is a key phase to then open up ground level to ground level, getting into the building, getting into a vital space for, yes, all of us who use that building every day, but potentially a good community space. The kind of difference to that building that this space has made here that you're sitting in. But it is an improvement in accessibility. There are other steps later. We don't know what those are yet, but this is a first big step. The entranceway linked to what Rena just explained so clearly.
Thank you.
And I would, okay.
Oh, yeah, microphone, if you can, please. Yeah,
We have other people.
Okay, yeah. You can sign up again, but to be fair, it is quite late and people have
Mr. Crowley and then Mr. McKinnon.
Thank you.
Hey, I'll try to be brief. Jay Crowley here. I want to say, Alex, wonderful job on the presentation. And a sincere appreciation to everybody on the Board of Education. I've been attending these meetings for 8 months now. Regardless of what happens, the combination of what gets passed or doesn't, your efforts are appreciated. You've shown a tremendous amount of empathy and flexibility and strategy throughout this whole process, and as a community, we're very grateful. So thank you.
That's kind.
I have a question about Prop 2, and then one about Prop 3. I'll try to be fast here. Prop 2, I saw the numbers. It was saying, if I remember, the New York State said that our cafeteria is 50% undersized, yet the new cafeteria would be 30 to 33% larger. How are those not reconciling? Why are we not getting 50% larger?
Can I answer that first?
Yes, please.
It's a fast answer also. The board looked at it. We know 11th and 12th grades, a lot of them go out for lunch because they can. And so we felt like if we made it full size, it's sort of making it too big, frankly.
Great, thank you. So it was considered, I appreciate that. Yeah. And then the 20-minute increments that they have for lunch, does that change at all? Is that a constraint? Is the size of the cafeteria a constraint that actually makes lunch so short? And would that make lunch longer than 20 minutes?
So so the way the periods are, because you have a combined campus, there's still going to be the beginning and end of the day, but I think what would likely occur is what we actually tried earlier in the school year, is where we have 2 grade levels, because currently what occurs is when the 5th grade is using the cafeteria, the 6th graders are at the recess yard, and then they flip-flop. But earlier in the school year, in an attempt to give students more recess time, we attempt to have the 5th and 6th graders come to the cafeteria at the same time and eat, so that they could have both more time to eat and then potentially more time at recess. So, yeah, so the answer to your question is the physical constraints in the current cafeteria, it didn't flow well and it didn't work well. We feel as though, because I've been in many schools, including this one, where the capacity to serve lunch, because of the layout, they could handle doing the 2 grade levels. So I think the idea would be that with the new cafeteria, they would likely have the 5th and 6th grade and the 7th and 8th grade eat at the same time, which would then allow them both more time, so they wouldn't just be limited to 20 minutes in and 20 minutes out. And again, it was something we tried for about a month or so, right, Bill? And then decided we couldn't handle the flow in the cafeteria. So the idea would be that it would still be a 40-minute period, but it does allow for more time in the cafeteria, and then as the kids are ready to do so, they can go to the outside to the recess.
And I'll just very quickly add, in the modern school design, as they can attest to, if you, even in a combined school, you would have 2 cafeterias, you'd have a middle school cafeteria and a high school cafeteria.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think also just the flow from the cafeteria out to the play yard is going to be so much quicker coming up from the cafeteria under this bridge out to the play yard, that it just allows for that free passage and more time for play outside.
Thank you. And then one.
You had a
quick-
second one, right?
Yeah. One quick thing on the on Prop 3. I just want to quickly add my perspective here, in case there's anyone in this room that is undecided, or if there's anyone that's watching via Facebook. My perspective is that of a parent, but also of a coach. And for some people that have been in this room, I've been attending these meetings since November, and I've told the story. I've coached girls soccer, I currently coach boys soccer, and I hope to continue coaching soccer even after my kids are done playing, if that's not weird. I just really enjoy it so much. I would rather play on grass. I'm going to be honest with you. I prefer to play on grass. But it's not tenable, okay? Like, I posted something on Facebook on May 26th, and I went back and I looked at the dates from April 1st to May 26th, and we had lost 25% of our playable days. Not just me, the athletes have been struggling with this since I've been coaching for 7 years. It's not going to get better. If we had more land, that was a great comment. I would love to acquire more land. I love to play on grass. Pro athletes, they want to play on grass, and they can, because they're part of billion-dollar organizations, whether it's FIFA or it's Yankee Stadium, and I wish that I had the ability to play on that as well. And so when I think about just the constraints that we have and having to work within those constraints, I've just seen time and time again these fields get pulled. And the last comment I'm going to make is that as a resident, I have been kicked off of the fields from groundskeepers who were doing their job. I'm not going to say it doesn't make me upset, but they're doing their job because they have to protect the fields and they have to rest. I have been organizing pickup games in the summer with young boys and girls and had people come up to me and say, get off this field, as a resident in this town. And if you have a turf field or 2, then that does not happen. That field does not need to rest. You can play it 365 days a year. Let me be honest here. If you were telling me we're making all of Burke turf, I would say no way. No way. That's not what I want. But to create more utilization of these fields with 1 or 2 turf fields feels reasonable to me. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Mr. McKinnon, then Mr. Metzger. Mr. McKinnon.
Good evening.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you're exhausted, as we all are, and not just by tonight, but by the process in general. As fate would have it, I started my evening in the cafeteria at the middle and the high school. And I'm here now. And so I am with what is and with what could be. And that's the question I think we have to ask ourselves. Now, this is only the second time I've been in this space. The first time was at my youngest's graduation. So while there was a promise of the cafeteria, things take time. And so we didn't benefit from it. And the reality with this bond is even though I have 2 children in high school, they likely will not benefit from much of it, even if it all passes today. So why am I here? Why is anyone here? We're here to discuss what this means moving forward. And when we talk about who wins and who loses, that's not the question to ask. It doesn't matter what gets passed or what doesn't. I have friends, I'm very fortunate to live in a community where I have friends who are on both sides of this issue. I've sat down and had discussions about specific points, about fields, about spaces, about glass. And we've been open, and they've been good conversations. I've heard people talk about people in old Hastings think this way, new Hastings think this way. There is one Hastings. There is one school our children get to go to. And at the end of the day, when we vote in 8 days, we're going to have to ask ourselves questions. Do we want the world as it is, or as it could be? And let's just take a quick minute and say what that looks like. Because I want to make sure we're all on board with what that really means. If we vote no, so I've heard some people say, I'll vote for Prop 1. So the signal that we send is, I will vote for the bare minimum. I will make sure the roof don't leak and things don't go up in flames and the space is safe. Okay? I think we're mostly on board as a community. Let's do that. But are we in a community that what we choose to do is the bare minimum? So then the question is, if you're remodeling your home, do you not want a nice kitchen? Do you not want a dining room? Do you not want, as was said earlier, the heart of a place to be someone that looks like this, that we're proud in? The reason why I was in the cafeteria earlier today, because it was the induction ceremony for the Spanish National Honor Society, right? That's a nice thing. It was a wonderful ceremony in a space that was unbecoming of it. The space matters. You feel pride in it. You take pride in it. Not us, our children, the teachers, the administrators, the workers, they go in every day. And so we ask ourselves, are we going to fight about the type of glass? Are we going to sort of pick about the cost per square foot, second guess people who are experts in this? Now we are, as a community, highly qualified to ask questions. We have expertise. I do not question at all the motivation of the people who show up to these meetings who are well-intended. They love our children too. They had children. They love our community as much as we do. We have differing opinions on what that looks like in terms of practice. I completely get it. But what does it mean in terms of how we show up together as a community? The space they go into matters. I don't know how you could be sitting here after this presentation and think, oh, there's a different way to go back at Prop 2. If we vote it down, here's what will happen. Nothing. It will be crowded, they will eat in bathrooms, and at least the next two classes will have nothing happen, because that's how long it will take to probably to get another bond where somehow we rethink some incredible sort of different kind of thing that they haven't already looked at. So that's what's going to happen. Nothing on Prop 2. Now, if Prop 2 passes and say like, hey, we like the fact that like nothing's going to break in our schools, and we like the fact they have a nice place to go and show, no, but we're going to vote against fields. So here's what's going to happen. There are no turf fields. The school has already said, and they are doing with greater frequency, they pull the field for community purposes. We do not have municipal fields. They get pulled. And so if you have a young child right now and you want them to be an ASO, they will probably not be playing in river towns. They will have to go somewhere else to do so, because you will not have access to these fields. And so you'll have less access to fields. So let's just be honest. If we vote no for access to the fields as a community. We vote no for a nice place for our kids to eat and gather. right? And are we good with that? So I think there was a question, like someone mentioned earlier, there are trade-offs. What is the trade-off you're comfortable making? I will say, like I've said before in these meetings, if you have a financial hardship and you're concerned about your taxes, no one should ever doubt or question your reason for saying and voting no to any of these bonds. That's your family, that's your prerogative. But if you're second-guessing specifics about different kinds of plans or decisions they have made, or if you don't like the process, which maybe wasn't perfect, we cannot go back. We can only move forward as a community. And what will that look like 8 days from now? People are going to wake up and either say, we're moving forward, we can do nice things, we can build a community, we can come together. Or people are going to go, ugh. And you're going to say, we've got months or years of either nothing happening or more of this. Now, I've asked this question before in fairness, and I know this is a speech, not a question, but the question I have is a rhetorical one, and it's not for the board. I think the board, in good faith, as they've said before, and with great input from the community, has made adjustments to the plan. I don't know what the percentage is in terms of how much it's decreased from what it originally was, but the cost is lower, the number of fields are lower, the scope is much less. The specifics have already changed on so many things that people have said they wanted changed, and they said that there is more input to happen in the design process. So the question I have is a rhetorical one for those people who have opposed it, because I don't quite understand the intentions. What is enough? Is there a number you're comfortable with? Is the fact that we will never take turf fields? Is it that we don't think that they deserve a nice place to gather? Is it that you don't trust the board? Because I don't know how we fix these things, and I don't know what another 6 or 9 month process does. And so, for the love of God, as a community, in a world where we do not come together enough, take the win. Say, I have contributed to a good process, which is imperfect, but we have changed and made a better bond that is more responsive to the needs of the community, and let's please try to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Metzger, and then we have 3 after that.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. First, I want to say I've been begging the Board of Trustees for 6 years to hold meetings like this on important issues like this. And I can't thank this board enough, and the people that showed up in this room and everybody that got up to speak, and you let people speak their mind and get all of their ideas out. So thank you for that, and I wish the trustees would take a page out of your playbook.
Thank you.
There are many issues that have not been addressed in everything we've talked about, and has nothing to do with whether the cafeteria is too big, too small, enough classrooms. It has to do with the fundamental cost of what this is going to be. And it's not about whether the cost is too high or too low. It's about, is it accurate at $38.4 million? And I raised this issue back in December, and I believe I raised it again in February at a school board meeting. Back in December, we were waiting for a new president to come in, and I raised the issue that they were threatening tariffs. Well, those are no longer threats. They're here. I'm an architect. I get emails probably 2 or 3 times a week from local suppliers, from people outside the state. Cost of construction materials going up 10, 15, 20%. Before we put a shovel in the ground, I think that $38.4 million, assuming it was accurate back then, and I have no reason to doubt that, but I think we're probably looking at $40-something million at this point, because we are at a bad point in time to have this project moving forward. It's unfortunate, but it's where we're at. We have a second big issue going on. The federal government is actually going through and trying to dismantle the Board of Education. And we know that one of the things they're looking to do is get rid of funds for kids with special needs. And I don't know how what we're doing is going to be impacted by that, but I think it's something that really needs to be looked at before we start creating spaces that we no longer can afford to staff. Dobbs promised no PFAS in their field. My understanding is they're putting it in now, and in fact there is PFAS. I want to know that whoever is writing the spec on these drawings, that we have assurances that if in fact the turf field passes, that we actually get what we were promised. I don't want to hear somewhere down, oh, we really can't afford that high-end stuff. We're just going to put in what we can afford, and we don't want to hear that from the community. We take these things pretty seriously. Increasing the debt service, you showed a slide with debt service, what Hastings pays, what other communities pay. Increasing the debt service per student is a great aspirational thing. We want to spend more money on our students. But that is contrary to the idea that we want to make this community more affordable. As each person is required to spend more money per student, it goes against the idea of having an affordable community. I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but it's something we really need to be aware of. We can't be sitting on both sides of those fences and be patting ourselves on the back. So we need to be a little realistic about that. There's a big issue that just happened in the last 4 weeks at the trustee level. There are only 2 people in this room, by the way, that regularly go to trustee meetings, and I feel that we are somewhat blessed in that we can bring this information, but it's something we need to think about. The comp plan was passed, and as part of that, and as a separate issue, a pro-housing compact was passed. And if you do a deep dive into the comp plan, as I have done, and Kathy has been part of that, they are looking to give away to developers a huge amount of tax incentives. They're looking to eliminate a lot of oversight in terms of building permits. This is coming down from Albany, and we have the potential of developers showing up at our doorstep because we are an extraordinarily desirable community to live in, of a lot of new housing in a fairly short period of time. This plan does nothing to address that. It is going to be old before we put a shovel in the ground. And I'm concerned about that. We're going to spend $40 million. What happens 3 years from now when we have another 30 families in the village with kids going to the school and we're back right where we started? We need to think about these things, or else we're constantly going to be chasing our tail, and we don't want to be doing that. We do not talk about the additional number of staff in the school. For example, you're talking about making the cafeteria a more accessible space, having kids move through quicker. I'm guessing that's going to involve more cafeteria workers. So that's going to be an added cost. It's not part of the bond, but it's going to become part of a budget. We're putting in, I believe the latest number is 6 new classrooms. There were additional teaching spaces for kids. Where are we getting the money for those additional teachers? So our budget, more than likely, is going to go up in addition to paying for the bond. So it's not just the bond money we're paying for every year. We have to consider that. The other issue that was raised is, like, how much is enough? There are a lot of people in this village who are already hurting. I know, I talk to a lot of them. People like me, I'm not hurting, I will be honest with you, but I rely on Medicare, I rely on Social Security. From the federal level, they're talking about eliminating those things. Those things are going to hurt me tremendously. And you add that on to another $500, $600, $700, $800, $900 a year, and you go, well, what's the big deal? For a lot of people in this community, that is a huge deal. And we need to be cognizant of that. I've lived in this community for 25 years. I don't have kids in the school system, I never have, but I paid my taxes every year. And I'm very proud of the school system that we have because I do that. And there are 70% of the people that live in this village that don't have kids in the school. And there are people here that kids went through the school system and they stayed because they love living here. So let's make sure when we have these discussions, and I've had some great discussions with Alex and with someone else who I don't know whether they want to be identified, great discussions about these issues. We need, as a community, to keep having these open discussions without accusing and challenging people on what their motivations are. The last thing I'm going to ask is, the president today was threatening to have the governor of California arrested. We are in an uncharted territory here. I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody in this room can answer that question. But the question is, if martial law is declared, and I have a very real feeling that that is what this government is going towards, do we have an out on this? Let's say we vote the budget in, and we're making plans and we're going forward, and martial law is declared, and all of a sudden everything is shut down in the country. And if you're not old enough to know that that has happened in the past, it has happened in the past. do we have an out on this where we don't default on some huge amount of money? I'd like to know that there's an escape hatch there.
Sure.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you for raising a lot of the points. There's a lot of more points than questions about the last thing. So, and you can speak to this also. If you borrow money and you don't use it or you don't want to use it, either you don't actually borrow it in the first place, your bond is an authorization to borrow, so either you don't actually borrow it or you just return via paying off the debt immediately, so it kind of goes away. If you want to explain, the math's pretty accurate, right?
Yeah, well, I would say if you don't borrow it, it's a lot easier. Like once, if you were not to do any work, right? I think there would be some expenses that would be potentially incurred with the soft costs and things of that nature. But the short answer is if in, say, the bond's approved and our architects and engineers are preparing the full construction documents and all the rest, and then at that point, we were concerned and said, this is uncharted territory, we're not going to be able to do the construction. To your point, Alex, what we would likely do is we have whatever authorization we have, we would just borrow for the expenses we've incurred for our soft costs and pay, and then hold off on borrowing anything other than that. And then I just want to, it's just a very small point, but just touch on the cafeteria, which was just mentioned, if that's okay. The cafeteria, that's a contracted service, so it's self-operating, meaning the district does not spend any money on that. The cafeteria service, it's all self-funded through the sales of the food. So even, and then the way it would likely work is in our current cafeteria, we have a bunch of different areas, so even if they had to increase it, it would, would not be a cost to the district at all. As far as the teachers and things such as that, I think a lot of it is that we would be moving staff that is in shared spaces, not, there'd be potentially, I guess, down the road an increase, but I don't think it's connected to what we're talking about, increasing staff right now.
I think the space was meant to address the current issues that the current teachers face.
Yeah. I mean, Jim, you've repeatedly, and it's very helpful, reminded us of what the superintendents now across multiple states say is the most uncertain time in their careers. And I've been in this work since 1981 in a lot of different places. This is the most uncertain time we faced. What is certain, our need to commit to our children now and do what we can now. That is a certainty. So across the board, all of us who talk and think a lot. So I want everyone in the room to be assured that the leadership of this district is very aware of the climate we're in. I'm speaking factually. I'm not making a political comment. I have to look at the facts before me. But facts before me is, yes, it's incredibly uncertain, something that none of us have seen. My dad's 95 emeritus at MIT. He has not lived this anywhere in his life, period. Having said that, the certain thing is what can we do now thoughtfully, efficiently, and cautiously to ensure we do the best for our kids. Waiting is not the answer. So, but it's done with great care and thought, and we have outs, we have exit ramps if really bad stuff happens. So we've been thinking that through.
Thank you, Jim.
We have 3 left. Mr. Gentleman first. Next, Mr. Weiss.
Hey, Bob.
I heard someone say that no legitimate athletes want to play on turf. More than 90% of Hastings athletes voted that they wanted a turf, including myself. They are my teammates, my peers, and my friends. They deserve respect. We want turf, and we are legitimate.
Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, then last, Siri.
Good evening.
Hi, Audrey DeWeiss. I have 4 kids, 4 teenagers, one who just graduated last year, and 3 currently in the high school, all of whom are athletes. Alex, I just want to say thank you. Your presentation was outstanding, and I love how you started with the slide from 1927. I think one of the biggest problems our tiny little village has is this us against them mentality, and the old school versus the new school. And I've been a resident here for almost 15 years, and my daughter completed the 13-year club, and I still feel as though I'm treated like I just moved here last week. I hope that we can turn the page on whether or not people feel that the board did a good job on communicating this bond. At this point, that is water under the bridge, and it's time to turn the page on that. And regardless of how you feel about that, what is going to happen in 8 days is what counts. And the communication at this point, if you are not up to speed on what the bond and the propositions are, that is completely on you, and you have to let go of your bad feelings that you weren't communicated. Second, I'm really uncomfortable, and Bob, I'm sort of piggybacking with the idea that if the bond passes, the board wins. It isn't the board that wins. It's my daughter who takes extra time on her tests in hallway. It's my son who was on crutches this spring, broke his foot, and had to call the nurse 10 minutes before we got to the school that she could open the door. That happened for 3 days in a row. On the 4th day, he was so annoyed by that process, he decided it was easier to walk up the stairs with a broken foot than go through the ADA compliant door. My daughter who plays lacrosse would win by getting a turf field so that she has a consistent level playing field with her peers in the rest of Westchester County. Because navigating the divots at the Burke Estate is actually like it's a team captain's job to walk the new kids through the Burke fields to show them where the divots are to try to avoid getting injured. And then I'd like to speak to the idea that injuries on grass are fewer than they are on turf fields. First of all, a well-maintained grass field versus a turf field, current studies show that they are about equal. Now, I happen to work at Yankee Stadium, and I've been there for 30 years, so I feel uniquely qualified to actually speak to the fields at Yankee Stadium. In the old stadium, we did have a lot of drainage issues. They did end up actually redoing the drainage systems about 5 years before they tore down the old Yankee Stadium. But the new drainage system in the current Yankee Stadium cost $1 billion. That is with a B. And that is just the drainage system. They have 8 full-time grounds crew that work from 7 to 4 every day when there is no game. And when there is a game, they are there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they don't leave until after the sprinklers are on at night and the lights are off. And I have watched this many times. We would all love our kids to play on Yankee Stadium grass. It is not feasible. It isn't even feasible to have a collegiate level grass field here in Hastings. It costs too much money. There is not a single study that has ever compared the rock-hard ground in Hastings at the Burke Estate versus a turf field. That study does not exist. Kids frequently break their ankles at the Burke Estate. We had a girl who tore her ACL 3 weeks ago on Lower Burke. Our fields, through no fault of our own staff, cannot be maintained to a level that is safe. And it's super frustrating when you have kids who play on Burke. And I'll admit, in 2013, my kids were in Hillside. I didn't really know a lot about turf. I heard all the bad stuff, but I didn't really educate myself. I didn't educate myself until I had 3 kids, 2 of whom play football at Reynolds, and that field isn't great, and 1 who plays lacrosse at Burke. And that daughter took a wicked fall when we were at Putt Valley playing on turf. She took a fall. She literally slid, I don't know, 5-6 feet down the turf field, and I had a heart attack. I thought, oh my God, we're going to the ER. And she bounced up, kept on playing. And after the game, I thought she would have turf burns down her leg because that's what everybody tells me happens. She had nothing. And I said to her, oh my God, I literally thought we were going to the hospital. And she's like, it's turf, it's soft. If I had fallen like this at Burke, then I might be going to the doctor. But this is a much softer landing field. It didn't hurt at all. So I really wish that people would consider that we simply don't have the resources to provide our athletes. 70% of our high school students, 70, are athletes. That's an extraordinarily high number, and they deserve a level playing field. And I will say one other thing, because toxic chemicals were mentioned as being used in turf fields. Those same toxic chemicals are in your clothes, in my contact lenses, in the water bottles that we drink out of every day. If you look on your bathroom counter, nearly everything that is on that counter is made out of plastic. That's all chemicals. We use them all safely every single day. And as it turns out, the studies that showed that, for instance, the field that we would have voted on in 2013, the PFAS in those turf fields is actually less than what's in my contact lenses, which are in my eyes right now. So that matters, because if you just say PFAS are bad, but you don't understand how pervasive they are in your everyday life, you're not educating yourself. You're just parroting what other people are saying or fear-mongering. You have to educate yourself on the fact that PFAS is everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Last speaker.
Hey,
I'm going to be as quick as I can because I know everyone wants to go home. But I'll just start by saying I'm on the varsity softball team, and I do want to thank the community support that we received as we moved through finals. But I'd also like to share what myself and my teammates have experienced firsthand recently. If we're talking about whether turf is worth it, let's just look at our sectionals championship game, which was played on turf. It rained on the day of the game, but our game was only delayed by 1 hour. On grass, we probably would not have played at all. In today's state quarterfinals game, we played through 2 hours of rain with just a 10-minute pause. We were able to resume after that pause because the field we were playing on was turf. There was no way we could have done that on a grass field, and the game would have likely been called. Turf didn't just protect the field, it protected our season. Earlier, someone mentioned our values as a community. The current softball field, outside the window right here, is the farthest away from the high school. We are at the elementary school, and with the turf proposal, softball will be brought to the high school complex. So I guess my question is more for the community than the board. As a community, what are our values, especially as they relate to equity? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it? That's it? So we can all wrap up, I guess. Also, I just want to thank everybody for coming out here. This is the last public forum we're going to do, but as David mentioned, bond@hohschools.org, bond@hohschools.org. If there are follow-up questions, things that have been raised, we will continue to do legwork to chase these things down. So thank you all very much for coming.